So happy to see all of your smiling faces here today, this afternoon. And I actually visited your school a few weeks ago, and I plan to come back again to do some work there with programs that we're working on for collaboration with York College. But we want to continue our program. And we have the morning panel. I know you guys came in toward the end of that, but it was a very dynamic panel. And this afternoon session is no exception. I will assure you that this afternoon is just as dynamic, if not more so, in the person of Dr. Divine Pryor, who I'm going to introduce. We have, first though, coming to the stage is a friend of mine, but he's also a recording artist. He's a gentleman who plays jazz, he records jazz, he travels all around the world. He plays with hip-hop artists, he plays with Alicia Keys, Erykah Badu, Mos Def, you name the artist, he knows them, he plays with them. And we have him here at York College, and he's a fantastic artist. He's released several albums. And he has also another side to him, a very political side. And in which case, he has this particular piece he'd like to dedicate to you young people here today. So let's put our hands together for Professor Mark Adams.
Thank you, Jonathan. What an important moment this is, and a very necessary one. Now I'd like to take the time to be your mind for the next few minutes. I am your mind. The words coming out of my mouth, let it be your subconscious. Again, the words coming out of my mouth is your subconscious. I am your mind. All of the thoughts inside your mind wanting to be free. Well, now you got a chance to let your mind grow and be free. I am your mind. I am your mind. We are not defined by our circumstances. Poverty does not define us as a people, nor does our wealth. What defines us is our deeds and our ideals. Because within each of us is a never-ending magnitude of infinite strength, wisdom, and will. And we have to tap into it. am your mind. That you travel my roads through life, never knowing your own true reality. Because my thoughts remain like distant quasars. You abuse me, never letting me say and do as I feel. Our thoughts split from love affairs to choice of friends. We argue like two enemies, yet we are good friends. Now, there are moments when we harmonize with each other and become one with nature and reality. But these times are few, because after you replenish yourself, the fear of the truth sets in, and we split, and you start running through women, men, jobs, people, and life, looking for the answer, when I had it all along. But I smile, because I am your mind. I am your mind. Now, philosophies in me die like flies, because you disbelieve my power and my will. Now, do we come together because you think you're the captain of your mind? Well, you're not, because you think you are. I know I am. You are the captain of your mind, and you need to know it. I am your mind. I am your mind. You're like a solid volcano set up on a mountain of dreams and goals, waiting to pour over the top with success, but never erupting sometimes because you disbelieve my power and my will, your power and your will and your mindset. Now, I need more than sex to nourish my equilibrium, but I do need sex. I also need sun, trees, stars, creativity, and love. But you saturate my soul with too much of one and not enough of the other. And therefore I cry. But why do we cry? Because tears cleanse the windows of our minds. I am your mind. I'm your mind. So remember that there is a paradise within you. Now, if that vision is cloudy, it is because you cloud me with the overabundance of liquor and drugs and destroy my reality. You asked me a question, and I could not answer. And I am your mind. I am your mind. So let's remember that the more we increase the richness of that which is within us, the more we increase our happiness, provided that we increase in the same proportion the expression of that greater richness. Knowing that there are no limitations as to what we can do out here, as long as you don't set any for yourselves, and as long as you don't allow others to set any for you. And as long as you understand your own true reality and work from there, knowing that God is the source of your supply. And that all of your needs are constantly being met because there is a divine surplus. So I say all that to say that we have to live life with a passion. So let's create, solve, love, accomplish, enhance, develop, conquer, unify, create, solve, love, accomplish, enhance, develop, conquer, and unify. Show that we have a voice out here. Show that we have a unified voice out here. Talk to each other like you wish to be spoken to. Treat each other how you wish to be treated. And you then, therefore, will do your part. And have a unified voice and a unified stand. So, get involved. Like some of the panelists said earlier, really inspired me. Get involved because in November we got to get this president reelected. It's very important. Do what you feel you need to do and that you can do, because each person can do their part to make it happen, and not just get this president reelected, get a Congress in there that's going to work with our president so that we can start putting money back into our communities. Stop taking money out of our communities. And get this country back to work and get our communities thriving again. So we still have a lot of work to do, and each of us can do our part in getting that work done. Let's get to work. Work. Thank you.
Let's give Mark Adams another hand. Dr. Divine Pryor just said we are so fortunate at York to have him, and we certainly are. If you decide to come to York and study music, you're going to be studying with him because he's one of our premier faculty members here at York College in music. And as I said, a recording artist, and you can catch his last album called Embellishments, which is happens to feature me, ironically. But it is a great, great album, and he's many albums, but check him out. It brings me great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for this conference, Crisis of the Black Male, which is a two-day conference. Yesterday's conference was at Medgar College, which featured a different host of panelists and speakers. But today, we are ending this entire two-day event with our keynote for this afternoon, who is Dr. Divine Pryor, who is currently the Executive Director of the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions, located in Brooklyn. The Center offers an alternative voice in the analysis of criminal and social justice issues by including the combined lived and academic experience and expertise of people who have firsthand knowledge of social, judicial, and economic systems that scar so many communities. Dr. Pryor is a social scientist who has an extensive knowledge and experience in the criminal justice field, having spent most of his career administrating youth development, juvenile justice, community-based reentry, substance abuse, and addiction organizations. He has been particularly interested in the issues related to mass incarceration and the many factors that seem to be associated with these phenomena. He has traveled extensively, thank you, providing expertise and counsel on criminal justice-related issues to academicians, activists, advocates, judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, and others for the purpose of influencing policy decisions. Now I'm going to leave the bio alone since it's in the program, and I hear some of you reading it along with me. But more than that, more than what words say, is the impact that this man has on his surroundings, those people who he touches, whom he talks to, whom he has a moment or opportunity to speak with. One of the reasons why I'm glad that you're here and that you were brought here by those who are in your schools and the different leaders in your schools is that there are people in this world that care about you and about your future. And you may not be at that point yet where you are taking everything seriously in life. But let me tell you, there are those who are plotting against you right now. So we have to take this very moment seriously. So I ask you to please to sit back in your seats and relax for just one moment. But I want you to absorb and interact with our keynote speaker. Let us give Dr. Divine Pryor a big hand.
Good afternoon. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Good. I'm just so happy to be here. I want to thank York College and Jonathan Quasha in particular for extending an invitation for me to come out and present you with a few comments. I certainly promise that I won't be before you long, but I'll be before you as long as I need to be. And we'll see how the two reconcile themselves. Today is a very important day. And so I need to ask for your undivided attention for the next couple of moments while I speak, because I have every confidence that there are going to be some things that I will say that you might find useful. And the reason why I know this, because it just so happens that I spoke to a similar group of young men and women not even a week ago. The difference is that they were sitting in an auditorium, but they were not in the free world. They were in a juvenile justice facility. There were 300, 400, 500 of them. They look very similar to you. The only difference is that I was able to leave and they were not. And that there were some young men there as young as 15 years old who would never leave that place ever again. They received sentences without the possibility of parole on the end, which meant that they would never, ever see the light of day. And so I think because of that, I have to demand that you give me your undivided attention. I know it might be difficult for you to sit still and to be disciplined for another 20, 25 minutes or so, but I'm going to ask you to really try, because there are some things that I need to say that I think are very important. Let me start out by saying that it's unfortunate that we are in a crisis, but this is a crisis. I want you to know that although that there are no laws on the books that say it is illegal for you as a black or brown man to walk down the street, I'm going to tell you in practice, there's a law against walking while black. Trayvon is just the latest in a series of incidents that have taken place across the United States. It's almost becoming common knowledge for a young black man to be killed in the street. Sometimes at the hands of law enforcement and sometimes at the hands of another individual that looks like him. And let me tell you something. I have 7 black suits, and they're always in the cleaners. And I'm sick and tired of going to funeral after funeral after funeral. The caskets are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I've had enough. And so let me start out with the title of today's conference, Crisis of the Black Male, From Learning to Leading. I think that's a good title. Let me start out with a quote that says, "A man who doesn't know his history is bound to repeat it." So if you don't know your story, somebody else will tell it for you. And they may not be able to tell that story as accurately as it should be told, as precisely as it should be told, as truthfully as it should be told. So I want to give you a little overview of how we got into this crisis, because I want you to know that it just didn't come out of thin air. As you know, I'm a criminologist. I'm an aspiring researcher, I believe, a public policy analyst, a teacher. I taught as an adjunct in the City University of New York at Medgar College for 6 years. Up until a year ago, I was at Medgar College, where the Center for New Leadership was nurtured. Let me say that the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions is the only center of its kind in the world. It's the world's first and the world's only public policy, training, advocacy, and research center that was created and developed, designed, and run by formerly incarcerated professionals, representing every discipline from law to medicine. If that's too difficult for you to understand, let me break that down for you. That means that that center was designed, it was conceived, it was developed, it was cultivated by men and women who had spent time in prison but who have since acquired their academic credentials and have gone on to specialize in any number of disciplines. And we have all come together for the common purpose to develop solutions and to design methodologies and systems to begin to start turning the conditions that exist today around. The crisis, the black male crisis. And you want to know why it's a crisis, I'll describe that to you shortly. But let's start from the beginning. I'm going to say some things that, may not make you feel very comfortable, but it's the truth nevertheless. I want you to know that, in case you don't already know, that the history of black people did not start during slavery. Far too often during Black History Month, when we talk about black history, somehow we pull up George Washington Carver and we throw in Martin Luther King. And those who are really courageous will even throw in Malcolm X, although the majority of people who you hear today are spouting all these niceties about Malcolm X would have never walked the street with him when he was alive. It's convenient now for them to talk about how intelligent he was and how wise he was and some of the other negative things they come up with. But during that time, many of the folks today that stand in these politically correct postures and say all these nice things on stage about him during Black History Month would never have been caught dead with him while he was alive. You should know that. It's much easier for you to talk about these things after the fact as opposed to participating during the fact. Our history did not start during slavery. In fact, we had more history before slavery than since. That we had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history on the continent of Africa long before we even knew anything about an America. And I want you to know when you study your books, and if you study them real closely, that all of the great Greek philosophers and Plato and Anaxagoras and all of the philosophers and the scholars that came after them, I want you to know most of them spent their time learning on the continent of Africa. I don't say that, they say that. I want you to also know that on the continent of Africa, the same one that you may have been told, like I was told, that was a dark continent, that it was a continent that was no civilization, that people wear loincloths and cooked each other in pots and said words like booger mugger, none of which is true, but this was part of the history that somebody else wrote about us. Said that we made no contribution to civilization. What I want you to know, not only was Africa the origin of humanity, but it's also the origin of civilization. And hands down, not even open for discussion. Let's move on. Some issues are debatable, some are simply not. Now, you still might have some quack collar scholars out there still attempting to try to hold on to the fact that man's origin was somewhere other than Africa, and that's okay. I think that there's pretty much universal agreement now that the origin of man was in Africa, and the first people who walked were people with highly melanated skin that looked like me. And I was probably the lighter skinned of those. And not only was humanity formed there, but civilization. What does that mean? That means that all of the first science and the mathematics and the biology and the chemistry all was formed there. That meant all the science around crop rotation and the first clocks and all the very complex anatomical surgeries that were performed there. That meant that on that continent, that all of the things today that even defy the imagination, 2 of the 7 wonders of the world was on the continent of Africa. The Step Pyramid of Giza, which was placed directly in the center of the planet Earth, which defies the whole story about people thinking that the world was flat. There may be some folks, but it wasn't us. Because in order for you to put a pyramid directly in the center of the planet Earth, according to the science of geodesics, you would have to know that the circumference was 24,896,000 square miles with a diameter of 7,926. You would have to know that. You would have to know all the mathematical dimensions. You would have to know all of the sciences in order to place something directly flat in the center, because you know not doing so would disturb the balance of the planet Earth. You'd have to know that. There's no way you could have thought that the world was flat. In fact, I don't know where they came up with this erroneous assumption, because we know that even when Christopher Columbus allegedly discovered America, although we know he was shipwrecked off the shores of Florida and that it was the Native American folks who came out there and got him and brought him back to the inland, but that's a different story. But just that story alone defies the fact that there's no way he discovered America when you have millions of inhabitants already here. Yet that was in the books. And the other things that were in the books are even more interesting. They told us that the pyramids were used to bury the dead. Yeah, after they were used for many other things, that the pyramids were used as astrological observatories. They were used to conduct scientific experiments. They were used as classrooms where people went to learn. Outside of every pyramid on the continent of Africa, there's a symbol up there that says, "Know thyself." And let me tell you something, when I was coming up, they told us what you don't know won't hurt you. Yeah, what you don't know won't hurt you because it'll kill you. Lack of knowledge will destroy your very presence, and it also destroy your future. And some individual, I understand, of European descent said the easiest way to keep knowledge away from a black man is to put it in a book. And said the thicker the book is, the less you got to worry about it. And what bothers me about that is somehow I get the impression that there might be a ring of truth to that. Every single morning I get up about 5 in the morning, and I read about 3 or 4 papers, because you got to do so in order to get the truth. You know, the media has gotten to a point now where everything has to be sensationalized. And so we really gotta pull back all the different layers in order to get a little nugget of truth. So you have to read at least 4 or 5 papers to even get a little grain of the truth. Today's media is not really known to be totally truthful. It's not about telling the truth, it's about selling papers. But that's a different story. I'm back on this history thing because I want you to know why it's so important. And then I'm going to tell you why it's relevant to today. Our history is important because we have everything to be proud of. There's no reason why we should be walking around saying what we can't do. I don't even allow, my children are grown now, but when they were coming up, I never allowed them to use words like can't. I never let them use words like impossible. I never let them use words like it's too hard, because I had to remind them of their history and the fact that people went through all kinds of struggle in order for you to be here today. That we come from a people who had to work from can't see to can't see. That meant before the sun came up and after it went down, we were still working. And that after we got finished working, we still had to come and attend to the children. And I want you to know we didn't have the luxury. Women then, during those times, I'm talking about during slavery, didn't have the luxury of having a baby and staying in the hospital for 2 days. That woman had her baby, the umbilical cord was cut, it was put back on her chest, and she had to get back in the field within the same hour. There was no laying up. It was hard work and sacrifice, and people suffered and died. And the soil of America is soaked with the blood of your ancestors. I want you to know that. That you have an obligation to carry the torch, because so much was given for you to be sitting here in York College today. Now, that's my introduction. Now let me get into the substance. History. You got his story, you got our story, and then you have the truth. We have to see how we're going to work this thing out. Now, let me tell you what is true. What is true is that you are the recipients of a legacy. What is true is that you are the recipients of kings and queens. What is true is that you are the recipients of royalty, and that you are genius. I want you to know that you are incredible. I want you to know that you are strong and that you are mighty. I want you to know that you have within you the intestinal fortitude in order to make anything that you can conceive and believe become achievable. I want you to know that you are the trailblazers, that the world looks at you. You may not recognize this, but we are the fashion setters. We are the trendsetters. Every time we do it, somebody else imitates it. The reason why people now are reluctant to allow us to come into any discipline, any area, because we got a takeover mentality. Soon as you let us in, we become the best at it. Just look around at any area that you see us in and watch how we excel. That's the reason why they figure, okay, well, let's throw them into tennis. I mean, that's not something that they do. What happened? We excelled. Say, well, I know that they're not going to excel in golf because golf is way off the Richter scale. But let us in golf, excelled. Every single area that we go in, once we put our mind to it, once we recognize from where we came, once we realize that we are descendants of genius, once we come to the conclusion that we are the recipients of a legacy of greatness, that our ancestors was the one that laid down the foundations of science and mathematics, and that all the things that the world right now marvels at were things that were developed by your ancestors. Once you recognize that, there's no more looking down. There's no longer being depressed. There's no longer using words like I can't do, it's too hard, it's impossible, particularly mathematics. Mathematics is something that we should do easily. Mathematics is something that you should do in your sleep. Trigonometry and calculus and algebra should be basic, fundamental. That should be something you do in your spare time. There's no such thing as it's too hard for us to do. What's hard is recognizing the power that's within you. And let me tell you something. There's some folks who don't want you to recognize that power because you're being looked at as a commodity. The first time I heard it said that fourth grade reading scores were being used to determine how many prison cells to build, I automatically dismissed it. I said, oh, that's just urban myth. I said, oh, that's urban myth, you know, because a lot of times there's misinformation. Well, I'll tell you what, I want you, when you get an opportunity, I want you to go to Google, and I want you to type in fourth grade reading scores and prison. Make sure you have enough paper. Pages and pages of information and articles and stories that have been written about this phenomenon. And you know what? It makes sense. Let me tell you why. If you can't read by the fourth grade, that means that you're going to have a difficulty using logic and reason. If you have a difficulty using logic and reason, that means that you don't know how to make good decisions. You're not exercising sound judgment, which means that in your inability to do so, that you're not going to qualify to compete in the labor market. You're not going to excel in the higher learning arena, which means that the only alternative left is manual labor, and or you're going to try your skills on the street, which is going to put you at odds with law enforcement, which more than likely is going to place you in prison. Do you know that every time I go speak to an audience like this, 2 or 3 weeks later when I go to Rikers Island, I see some of the same young men who were in the audience who thought they knew more than I did, who were grinning and smirking and, you know, who didn't want to pay attention. They're there now on Rikers Island. I say, listen, young man, you're not the same guy that was sitting in York Auditorium when I was there 2 weeks ago, right? You were the one that didn't want to hear what I had to say. You were the one who knew so much. You were the one that was so tough. You were the one who wanted to be popular, thought you were impressing your peers, so this is the reason why while I was speaking you had other things to say and do. You're not the same young man, are you? And you don't look so tough now, by the way. I'm telling you that there are some folks who have a jail cell with your name on it right now. I hope you don't think that people build prisons because they want to beautify the landscape. They don't build prisons because they want to experiment in architectural design. They don't build prisons because they don't have anything else to do. They build prisons because those prisons are to be filled. And I want you to know that everywhere I go across the United States, even in places where I can't find a person that looks like you on the street, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Idaho, I go into the prison, and as far as you can see in every direction, a sea of black men. Everywhere I go. And I'm going to tell you what's sad. About 10 years ago, I went to a school in Brooklyn. They said the kids were acting out. They were third graders. So I went there to talk to the young man to find out what was happening and see if I could inspire them. And the young men began to start talking about life in the community, and it wasn't long before we learned that there were some dads who were incarcerated and even some moms, and there was some substance abuse issues and domestic violence and the things that one would expect to hear in an area like Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. And I began to tell them that's the reason why you got to go to school. That's the reason why you got to learn, so you can become anything you want, and that the cure for cancer is in this room. And that's the reason why you have to continue to excel, so you can become anything you want. You can become doctors and lawyers and engineers, and someone's going to Mars and to Pluto. Someone in this room right now is going to win a Nobel Peace Prize. I began to inspire the young man. I began to tell him that's the reason why you got to seek knowledge, because knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. And if you take the word knowledge, you get 4 words. You get the word know, the word now, the word legend, the word edge. So you have to know the ledge now so you don't fall off the edge later. We begin to inspire the young men. And right at that point, I said to them, I want you to break up into 4 groups. I want you to separate yourselves, and I want you to draw where you see yourselves in the future. And each one of the groups went to their respective areas, and they drew something. One group came back with a drawing that I found very disturbing. They drew a classroom with a tunnel that went straight into the prison, with young men walking through the tunnel. So I immediately terminated the exercise and said, I apologize to you. Obviously, you didn't understand my instructions, all this talk about, prison and, drugs, and you got it confused. Let me explain to you again. The little 3rd grade boy, black male, grabbed my jacket, and he said, sir, we understood what you said. I said, well, I don't understand it. Of all the things I said you could become, out of all the things you could have drawn, why would you draw that? And the little kid looked at me with a puzzled look on his face. And he looked at the kid on his left, kid on his right, and he shrugged his shoulders. He said, because that's where we go, mister. Everybody knows that. Because somehow it had already been programmed in their mind that this is where they're going to end up. And I guess if you come into school every day and you got to go through metal detectors and you got to be patted down, and there are police officers in the school and they got wands and there are dogs, and when you come outside and there's a lineup of police officers, I guess if in fact that's what you go through every day, I could see how one could come to that conclusion. I can see how every time you turn on the 6 o'clock news or the 7 or 8 or the 11 o'clock news, the only time you see a so-called criminal is when you see a black male being put in a police car as if that's the only person in the world committing crimes. I can see how somebody can reach that conclusion. I can see how when you have men in your communities going to prison, coming home bragging about how they did a sweet bid and how, going up north is some kind of accomplishment. Yeah, I can see how young men can reach that conclusion. That's the reason why we have to present them with some different examples. Because that right there is a false belief. And I don't want anyone in here to accept that for a moment that that's your destiny. Instead, I want you to defy the stereotype. That's what I want you to do. You can clap. So that's where I'm going to close out. That's where I'm going to close out. In defying the stereotype. Let me tell you why you can defy the stereotype. You have my bio there so you can read it. I, like most black males, grew up in a family with a lot of brothers and sisters. In school, I was defined as bad. They said I was bad. They said I was disruptive, that I was incorrigible, so forth and so on. Once they label you bad, that means that you become like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because everything you do, they say, confirms the fact that you were bad, and so they just continue to reinforce the original definition, and that's how you become bad, and then you start to question yourself, say, well, maybe I am bad. And you internalize that definition. Well, I was in a similar situation. They said I was bad. They continued to put me on detention. They had detention then. I understand a lot of times now you don't even make it to detention. They go straight to suspension and expulsion. They have so many index crimes now in the public school system that it's not hard for you to get put out of school. Trust me. But I was one of those young men who we now know was very smart. I think I was smart. And I think what we realized happened is that intellectually I was growing much faster than my social development could handle. So there's a gap in between. You're not stimulating me intellectually. Socially, I'm not developing as fast. There's a gap. So you do things. So I did things, and I was labeled bad as a result. No one ever stopped to check me out. Well, why don't you send them to counseling, or somebody talk to them, let's see what's going on. That never happened. I was sent to detention. They never even stopped to realize that in detention, I used to organize my peers and help them with their homework. I had kids who had completed their detention, would come into the school and start heading towards the detention room, and the Guidance counselor would say, no, you're not on detention anymore. You got off yesterday. No, but I got to go back. Yeah, I got to go back because the guy there, he's helping me finish this project. So kids wanted to come to detention because apparently they were getting something that they may not have been getting in the classroom. I don't know. I don't have any empirical data on this, but I'm just telling you a story. So as a result, I was kicked out of school, and of course the streets welcomed me with open arms, which they generally do. And they said, I heard you kind of smart too. Maybe you can show us how to get in this window or do some other things that weren't totally legitimate. And I did. And at the ripe age of 17, I find myself sitting in a prison cell asking the question, why am I here? That's not what I want. I love reading, writing. I love science. I love math. Why am I here? How did this happen? How could this happen? And so I began to study the criminal justice system. I began to ask questions, and I found out there were a lot of other folks like me that were in prison. They weren't dumb people. They weren't stupid people. They didn't have learning disorders. They were individuals who had been misdiagnosed or labeled in a manner that wasn't appropriate. And so I end up in prison, and I start studying the criminal justice system from the inside out. That was 30-something years ago. Studied everything I could. Studied the way it operates, the institution, who's there, where they coming from. You know what I found? I found out that the majority of people that are in prison, number one, look like us. The majority of people that are in prison are in there for drug-related crimes. But the majority of people who use drugs don't look like us. Something wrong with that math. That if you go to the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics, it'll tell you that drug use is pretty much even across the board. When it comes to cocaine use and other drugs of that sort, that whites use drugs at a higher proportion than do people of color. Yet there are 2 or 3 times more people of color in prison for using drugs than whites. Something's wrong with that math. This is not new information, by the way. This is pretty general information. Why is this important for me to tell you this? Because the crisis of the black male has nothing to do with you, per se. Certainly, it is true that we have to be responsible for what we do. Certainly, it is true that we have to be accountable for the decisions that we make. That is true. But it's also true that there's a social contract and that the institutions in society are responsible for educating our children, and they're not. That the institutions in society are supposed to provide us with health care that's of quality, and it's not. That the institutions in our society are supposed to create a labor force that allows us to be able to compete, but it's not. That the political system is supposed to be a fair system, that the judicial system is not supposed to mete out justice in accordance to how much you can afford. That everybody is supposed to get a fair trial, and that's just not true. And I know everyone wants to embrace the fact that we live in a post-racial America. I want that to be true, and I wish it was, but it's not. We live in a society today that is just as racist today as it was when America was first founded. And the reason why that's the case is because we refuse to address the issue of racism. We won't address it. I was told when I was coming up, there's 3 things you don't talk about: race, politics, and religion. But I want you to know those are the first 3 things I talk about. And I figure if we can get past that, then you and I might be able to have a relationship. If we can't have an honest discussion about the inequalities in society, about the injustices in society, about the way certain groups are being treated and certain groups are being mistreated, about the fact that everybody doesn't have a fair shot and everybody doesn't have equal access, and the reason is because of the race issue. If we can't resolve that and we can't discuss that, then we don't have a relationship anyway. Because that means people want to be politically correct, and they want to get up here and they want to pontificate. They want to sit here and throw out all kind of stats and mislead you and misguide you, and then wonder why you missed the point and end up in mischief. That's not my role. So at 17, I ended up in prison. I began to study in prison. Let me tell you what I did. I studied and studied and studied, got my associate's degree, and got my bachelor's, my master's, and came home and earned my doctorate degree and began to specialize in criminal justice, began to travel all over the world, began to write position papers, began to teach, began to train, began to become a role model, began to become a living example of what's possible when you put your mind to it. Yeah, someone said that I wasn't going to be nothing, but they were wrong. Somebody said that I would never excel to a higher height, but they were wrong. Someone said that I came from nothing, that I would never become anything worthwhile, but they were wrong. They said that I wouldn't inspire anyone. They said that I would not be a leader. They were wrong. Because today, unlike what they said, the same prosecutor's office, the Kings County Prosecutor's Office in Brooklyn, under the leadership of Charles H. Hines, who is the district attorney, that same office is the same office who I consult with, who calls on me about criminal justice issues and matters, who seeks my advice and direction and guidance about how they should proceed in particular cases. Who would have ever thought that this young black man who they said was bad, who they said was incorrigible, who they said would never amount to be nothing, would come to be an advisor to the same prosecutor's office that sent him away? Whoever said that this same young black man who was misled into mischief would end up rising to a point where he would begin to travel all over the world and become a role model and inspiration for thousands of young men across the world? Who would have ever thought that that same young man would not accept the stereotype, would not accept the definition, would not rely on them, but instead would go on his own and would find light in a place where there was none to be found? Who would ever thought that he would change his attitude and determine his latitude? Who would ever thought that he would see the glass as half full instead of half empty? Who would have ever thought he would turn a stumbling block into a building block? Who would have ever thought that he would change his thinking to such a degree that whatever the world gave him, even when they offered him a barrel of lemons, would say, let's go into the lemonade business? Who would have ever thought? Who would have ever thought that I would close with these remarks? That in the words of the man known as El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, otherwise known as Brother Malcolm X, would say that we as a people have done so much for so long with so little that we're now qualified to do anything with nothing. I want you to know that you should always shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll still at least be amongst the stars. Thank you so much.
Let's give Dr. Divine Pryor another hand. Now we're going to open our session up to questions and answers. You may have some questions for him about his life, about his work, about his teaching, about any of the things that he mentioned in his address, and we hope you do. If you do, you can please come to the microphones that are on the side there. We hope that you have listened to some of the things that he said and have maybe stirred something in your mind to make you want to know something in particular. So, and I'm sure that you do. I'm sure some of you are looking so attentively. So if you would, just please go to the mics on this side. Does anyone have any questions? He's answered all your questions, so it's so if you can just wait 1 second till they cut that mic on. Try it again. He's coming behind you. 1 second.
Okay, his question is, who was my role model? And I'm gonna answer that two ways. One way is that my role model were men on the streets, on the corners, engaging in activities that they did not let me know what they were, but I knew that they were up to something. These individuals seemed to have all the girls. These individuals seemed to have all the attention, all the respect. I learned later, however, that they had false respect. That the only reason why they had people around them was because of what they had, not because of who they were. I knew that these same guys who had all this attention, as soon as they went away, they never got a visit, they never got a letter, they never got a package. These are the same persons who said that they want to stand up and rep the hood, and everybody loved them and everyone applauded them, but when they went away, they were alone. On the other hand, I also had my uncles and my father, and I had the local postman who I used to see come and go every single day. That instilled in me some basic values. So I had some role models, but they were kind of competitive, and it wasn't until I came into my own that I realized that one set of role models was the real thing, and the other one was artificial and nothing but a dream. So you choose which role model is the one you want to follow, but I'm going to suggest that you follow the one that's going to give you longevity, that's going to teach you good examples of work ethics, the one that's going to give you good advice, and the one who's going to give you the kind of guidance and direction that's going to make you the man that you want to become. Go ahead, I'm ready.
I wanted to know, when you travel the world, did you ever go to Africa?
Did I ever go to Africa? I started there. I mean, I started in South Africa, in Soweto.
What did you learn? Like, did you learn any, like...
He said, can you speak in the mic? Yeah.
Ever did you, when you were over there in South Africa, did you learn about new inventions that people would never have heard, like generally, because they're never in the books? Like,
Yes, I did. You know, what I found out when I went to South Africa is that our people in South Africa were just as misinformed as we were.
how so?
They were under the false impression that their brethren who had been taken from them some hundreds of years prior to that did not have a connection and a love to the continent, didn't have an appreciation for the richness of what they had to offer, didn't know the history, didn't know the culture. Of course, in a discussion that I had on several occasions while I was there, they found out that nothing could be further than the truth, that we love our history, that we admire the contributions that our African brothers and sisters made, and that we consider ourselves still a part of the family, although we were far removed, that we never, ever forgot where we were taken from and what the land of Africa meant to us. But somehow they were taught that that wasn't the case. In fact, they bought into the same stereotype that many folks, that African Americans are shiftless and lazy and we don't care. My question to the world is, did we become shiftless and lazy after 400 years of slavery, or was that before? That's what I learned.
Thank you.
How you doing?
How you doing?
My question is, you spoke of before that you was labeled as a bad child, I should say. When did you take the initiative to stand up and let them know who you really was, instead of letting them label you as what they thought you were?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask that question. And I'm working on my book right now, and that question is one of the questions that was given to me. You know, when you're young, you're very impressionable. And in fact, you may know that for a lot of young men, irregardless of their ethnicity, the teacher has more influence on you sometimes than even your parents. And that the teacher and the other paraprofessionals in the school, if they're all kind of saying this, you know, you kind of, you know, you believe what they're saying, right? You accept these things on face value. The other thing is that you don't know what's going on, right? I mean, at this time, I can look back in hindsight, and I realize now what was happening to me socially and intellectually and physiologically and developmentally. But of course, when it's happening to you, you don't know what's going on. You kind of confused, and you kind of being moved around and pushed around. So at that point in your life, it's really difficult for you to stand up, right, and take the initiative, because you don't have the tools, right? I mean, I couldn't articulate what I was thinking and feeling at that time. I had not mastered the English vernacular yet, so I couldn't even go into a clinical diagnosis. I didn't know about the, you know, the DSM-4 and all the various different categories and classifications for behavioral science. I didn't know those things. I know them now. I can look back and I can clearly tell you what was happening. Back then, I didn't. And what's unfortunate is there are a lot of young men who are not in position to exert themselves because they don't have the tools to accurately describe what's happening with them both internally as well as socially.
Okay.
So I would have loved to step up, but I just didn't have the tools.
All right, and one more thing.
Sure.
Why did it take you to go through the system to actually take the time to study the actual law?
Well, you know, it's interesting that the system, when you go inside, I just want you to know, when you go into a prison, hopefully you'll only go to visit. But if you go into prison, you still have options. There are people in prison who have decided to still maintain the same behaviors. There are some people who become religious in prison. There are some people who go into action. You still have stimuli. You still have choices and options. Prison offers an opportunity, if you choose to take it, for you to focus, an opportunity for you to do some soul searching, some cleansing, and to come to terms with who you are. And it's unfortunate that an individual would have to go to prison for that to happen. That same condition in those same circumstances should be available in society, so one would not have to go to prison for that to happen. Right. So going to prison to find that is an unfortunate situation. And let me tell you something. I am one of the few. It's not like I am the rule, I'm the exception. Because far too often individuals go into prison and they listen to war stories. And they got people out here feeding foolishness in their ear, and then they take those same characteristics into the prison, and unfortunately they end up doing more time or end up getting hurt or killed. And so prison is just a set of circumstances where individuals have to confront their own realities and their own demons, and it's up to you what you do with them. I chose to study myself, the environment, to go to school, but a lot of folks don't do that, and prison unfortunately breeds some other characteristics which are not healthy for the individual or for society.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I understand you have to go, so this is the last question I can take. Go ahead, young man.
Okay, hi, how are you? My name is Travis Rayburn. My question was, you said that when you were 17, you ended up in prison. What did you precisely do that had you end up in prison?
Stole cars, had possession of drugs, had a loaded handgun, associated with all the wrong people, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it, not so much of what I went there for. The fact is that I was engaging in illegal behavior, and that as a result, I was arrested by law enforcement and sent to prison for much longer than I wanted to be there. I think that you know, peer pressure had a lot to do with it, but I'm not going to absolve myself of any responsibility. I made some bad decisions. You know, I exercised poor judgment. I made some bad decisions. I got caught up in the wrong crowd. It's a combination of things that happened that led me to prison. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I ended up coming into the criminal justice field through the back door. What I will say to you, that time in prison was a very, very serious experience for me. It was very insightful. There are people now who hold the same degree I do academically that don't understand the system nearly as well as I do. And it would be difficult for them to do so, having never walked that walk, never having been inside even to visit someone, to become an expert on prison, and you've never been in a prison, you've never visited anybody in prison, you've never been near a prison, and wouldn't choose to go near one. It was hard for you to convince me how you're an expert in something that you've never had any involvement with. So that's the position I take, even in academia.
And one more thing, I wanted to know, did being in prison inspire you to lead the life that you are leading now?
Oh, there's no question. This has been 20 years removed since the time I left out of a state prison. I've been doing this work since the day I got out. This is my life's work. This for me is not even work, in fact. This is a labor of love. This is a mission for me. I do this out of my own time. I spend my own resources, my own money. I come do this at no cost, just so I could hopefully inspire someone to think more critically, to make more logical decisions, to think more reasonably. But this is my life's work. Do I get paid for it? Yes. But when I'm doing community work like what I'm doing today, this is all coming straight from my heart. This is what I want to do. I take joy and pride in doing this work.
Thank you.
One question. Can I ask a question on, good evening, I am Andrew Johnson. I'm a student here. I just want to ask you a question. Basically, Geraldo Rivera is a very well-known journalist, the Willowbrook case and all that stuff. he recently commented about the Trayvon Martin situation and about black kids and Latino kids wearing hoodies.
Right.
What is your opinion on this whole Trayvon Martin case and what Geraldo Rivera said? I just want to know that.
Well, Geraldo Rivera is off the hook. First of all, I think that his remarks were inappropriate. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say that they were stereotypical, and I'm leaning almost towards saying that they were racist. But let me say this. You know, I know criminal procedure law pretty well. I'm yet to find a statute in there that says it's against the law to wear a hoodie. That's right off the top. Second of all, I think that it's unfortunate that young black men have been villainized, have been demonized, have been criminalized to the point now that what you're wearing now gives justification for law enforcement to approach you aggressively. I think that it's unfortunate, but what's even more unfortunate is that this kind of behavior is tolerated. So you got to understand that if, let's just take the NYPD, but we have other police forces that are just as aggressive. Let's just say that the NYPD took a position that they were not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. Do you know it could stop just like that? You know the reason why these things are happening to black men and Latino men and other men of color? Because of the culture. They've bought into the idea that black men are dangerous, that black men are violent, that black men are predatory, that we present a danger to society, that you don't have to do anything, just your very presence alone represents a danger. And as a result of that, you have an officer riding down the street, and this is what happens. He'll see a group of black men on the corner. This is how they process it. Group of black men on the corner, you either did something, doing something, or about to do something, therefore you're guilty of something. So you are guilty just by your very presence based on how they have interpreted and how they have decided to internalize stereotypical information. And it's unfortunate. The Trayvon situation, as I said when I started, is just one of many. Come on, we can sit here until the end of time and name names of all the black men that are being killed. And it's not going to stop, by the way, until the black community reaches a level of tolerance and says, no more. Because I can tell you there are some other communities that law enforcement will not go in there and kill those children. Let them try to go out in Scarsdale and do that. Let them go out in Suffolk County, Westchester County. Now, let them attempt to go out and start killing young white males at the rate that black. And I'll tell you one thing, I bet you it'll stop then. I bet my life that it would come to an immediate stop. Black life, for some reason, has been devalued. That's part of the crisis that we're in. We have to increase the value of our lives. We have to stand up. We have to say no more. We have to look out for each other. We have to protect each other. We have to do this for ourselves. We have to do it. Otherwise, next year, the year after, and 10 years from now, we'll still be having the same conversation. That's my answer. I hope it wasn't too long.
Okay, thank you, sir. I just want to know.
So you got to let some groups go? Okay.
I'm just going to look to my principal and see, is it okay if there's 2 more questions? Okay. So these 2 young men right here.
Great. Go ahead. Come back in the mic. I can't hear you. Speak.
I'm always hearing children say that they're going to be
Did you catch this question? Oh, you don't see many black officers, you say, patrolling the streets? See, now that's a question that requires a little time for me to explain. But let me just say this. This problem that we're having, community relations, police relations with the community, is not an individual problem, it's a systemic problem. That unfortunately, that even if you took out, I mean, you could take all the white officers out and you would put black officers in, and if their mentality is of a particular mindset, the outcome's still going to be the same. So I'm not going to stand here and take the position that it's black officers or white officers. No, I think it's an institutional and it's a systemic problem that we're having here. It's not about the individual. There are individual officers who are good officers. In fact, I will go so far to say is that the majority of officers on the force come to work each day to do their job. They come to work each day with the expectation that they're going to go home that evening with their wife and their children. They don't come out expecting to be killed or to kill someone else. That's not what I believe. What I believe is happening is that the rot that has been present in the law enforcement community has been allowed to spread and has gone unchecked. And I believe, Commissioner Ray Kelly, whenever I get an opportunity to be in his presence, which I like to more than he would like me to, he gets angst. It troubles him, because he knows that, I got some questions that I want to ask, very pointed questions. Ray Kelly says that there are only a few rotten apples in the force. Now, Ray Kelly has been the commissioner for about 10 years. So if 10 years ago there were only a few rotten apples on the force, how many rotten apples does he think on the force now? And now, I used to go down south in the summertime when I was a young, I was 4 or 5 years old. And my grandmother used to let us pick apples. The first thing she used to say to me is, boy, don't you put no rotten apples in that barrel. You know why she said that? Because if you put a rotten apple in the barrel with the other apples, the rot will spread. So my response to that is that this is not individual, it's systemic, and the rot has spread through the whole system, and we're going to have to use some very serious surgery to cut the rot out of the system. But it's not about individuals. It's not about black officers as opposed to white officers, because depending on their mentality, the outcome could still be the same. Great question, though. Are we going to rotate back and forth? Okay, I'm going to take his and I'll come back to you, sir. Go ahead.
What was your highest goal in life?
My highest goal in life? I haven't even reached it yet. Each time I reach a goal, I want to go higher, right? When I graduated college, that was my highest goal. I said, I might as well go get a master's degree. And I got there, you might as well go get a PhD. Then I said, I wanted to get a passport and travel around. No, I wanted to travel around the country. I did that. And I said, now I want a passport to travel around the world. So now I'm doing that. So now I'm looking at some other goal. Oh, yeah, I want to write 2 books. I got them in my gut. I'm trying to get them out. I want to actually put together a documentary. I want to develop some training tools for teachers and for social workers and case managers in the law enforcement community. So I just keep aspiring. I will probably never reach my highest goal. Every time I get to it, the stakes get higher. And I think that we should all be that way. We should never be satisfied, that we should always continue to keep going to higher heights and higher heights, because that's what keeps us active. That's what keeps us relevant. That's what keeps us vibrant. That's what keeps us involved. And that right there is what keeps us energized, because there's so much work to do, and I don't think in our lifetime that we're ever going to do all that needs to be done, because we're in a crisis, as you know, and it's going to take a lifetime or 2 to turn this thing around. You're welcome.
Doctor, mine is not so much a question as is a comment. You may want to comment on after. And I make these comments based on what I heard this morning, and the round of applause that was given when it was mentioned you can wear what you want to wear. Wearing a hoodie and black young men wearing their pants below their behind are 2 different things. And I hope that our young men who are here today will go away from here realizing and understanding that wearing a hoodie like Trayvon had on and young men wearing their pants below their behind are 2 different things. Mm-hmm. And certainly, as you said, I can name Clifford Glover and other young men who were killed in this community who didn't have on a hoodie. I don't know of any white young men who were killed by black police officers, and I don't know of any black police officers who killed white young men. Our young men have to realize that wearing a hoodie and wearing their pants below their behind, when you wear your pants below your behind, you're making a statement as to your sexual preference. And you need to be careful of that. You need to hold your mind, your head up. And our young ladies ought to not even take up with young men who go around like that. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we talked about President Barack Obama this morning. I am a President Barack Obama supporter, worked in his campaign the last time and working in his campaign this time. We need to look at what he is doing and not what he says. When when they were fighting in Washington about the budget, President Barack Obama came to New York, and he was at Al Sharpton's annual event. President Barack Obama came to the Apollo Theater. We need to see him as he's developed and broke grounds for the 7-story African American History Museum to be built on the Potomac. This country spends $50 million a year to help maintain the Holocaust Museum. We are in a Holocaust, we've been in a Holocaust, and we're going to continue to be in a Holocaust until we do something about it. It takes more than us saying that he's going to be elected. Anybody who will be 18 years old by the end of this year can vote in this election. And we need to put aside our differences and support President Barack Obama's differences. Certainly, he could have come in with an iron hammer and knock things around and beat people up and yell for black people when he became his president, and he would never have had the opportunity to become president for a second term. He's used wise maneuvering, and if you'll notice, he has outmaneuvered the system on many occasions to remain where he is now. We must do whatever we can to get registered to vote, to take people to the polls to vote if we don't want to vote, and help him to be reelected so that he can continue to do the job that he has done and he will do for us when he's reelected.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that statement. Let me give a couple of responses. As I said earlier in my remarks, there's no law against wearing hoodies. In fact, I do work out in Long Island, particularly in Glen Cove, Long Island, and I work with a lot of white males. In the morning time when I'm standing out there, they all come in with hoodies on. I've never known them to be stopped. I've never known them to be harassed, at least for wearing their hoodies. They get harassed for some other things, but not for wearing hoodies. But however, let me say this. We have to be smart, right? I don't want to tell young black men not to wear hoodies because they should have the right to wear what they want. But what I will say is this. If wearing hoodies is putting you in danger, if wearing hoodies is making you the target, then we might want to reconsider our fashion and look at some new fashion alternatives, because if you're willing to pay the price of your life to wear a hoodie, I don't know if that's the best trade-off. That's number one. Number two, I'm from the old school, so I would prefer young men to wear their pants up with their belts tight. Now, I'm not with the whole pants down thing. I thought that was going to be a passing fad that was only going to last a month and then go away. It's shocking to me that it has even lasted this long. I'll tell you, there's an experiment going on in Yonkers with the young women. There are 4 middle schools and about just as many high schools of young ladies who have decided that if, in fact, your pants are down, you don't have anything to say to me. That there's nothing that you have to say that you can say to me with your pants down. It's working. I wish this was a room of young women because I could tell them how much power they have and how they can wipe that whole fashion thing out the box quickly. They got a lot of power. I'm going to say that. What I will say is this. I spend a lot of time doing consciousness raising. I want to raise young men's values. I want to raise their ethics. I want to raise their mind. I want to raise their thoughts. I'm going to lift up so when I get them to pull up their consciousness, their pants is automatically going to come up. So I'm not even going to start out talking about the pants. I'm going to talk about where your mind is at. And let's get that right. Because once we get that right, then you'll understand how important it is to get your pants up. Let's do some mind raising. And the pants thing will work itself out. But I'm old school. You know, I think that there should be a courting period, right? That if you want to take my daughter out, then I'm going with you. I think that if a young man wants to talk to my daughter, he should come and talk to me first. See, I'm real old school. My daughter and she'll tell you if she was here, she didn't have her first real boyfriend until she was about 22. Yeah. I'm not into a lot of game playing, you know. We have to protect our own. So we need to restore some of those traditional values, and I agree with you 100%. The situation with Barack Obama is interesting because we have short memory. We forget what President Barack Obama walked into. I mean, you don't think for one second that he had the same chance that Clinton had, the same chance that Reagan or Nixon. I mean, first of all, he was an outsider. And then we don't want to say that word, but, you know, Barack Obama is a black man. White America is still right now rocking from the tremor of that reality. Of course, we don't want to talk about that because you got to be politically correct. I'm not politically correct. I'm politically incorrect most of the time. I say the things that most people want to say but don't have enough courage to say. And I'll continue to say it until I can't say it anymore because the truth needs to be told. If we would have dealt with these issues 100 years, 200 years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with it today. We live in a post-racial America. Huh? I wish that was the case. I would like that to be the case, but it's not. And when are we going to stop fooling ourselves and deal with the truth? And if we do that, perhaps the next generation or the generation after might benefit from a world where people are not judged by the color of their skin, but like what Martin Luther King said, by the content of their character. Perhaps if we start now, the next generation might benefit from that. That's my abbreviated response, but thank you. It was an excellent remark. So we done? We done.
Let's give Dr. Divine Pryor another hand for magnificent responses, magnificent message. And I encourage you to find out more about his organization. Please continue to read his bio. I want to thank
Jonathan. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, students, guests, panelists. It's really great to see all of you here today. So on behalf of the Division of Student Development, it is my pleasure to welcome you to your college and to the Crisis of the Black Male from Learning to Leading Conference. Now, this morning's discussion will address the question of, are we living in a post-racial society? And some may argue, yes, especially since the historic election of President Obama. Indeed, we have arrived, or have we? While others say absolutely not, because race and color still matter in America. Recent events in Florida belie this supposition that we have arrived. The question to be answered or considered is, arrived to what? A changed America or a return to the past? So I challenge you to engage and embrace in this very difficult topic this morning. Now, I was threatened, advised to be brief. Therefore, I just want to take a moment to recognize Mr. Jonathan Quash and his Men's Center staff for organizing today's event, and I wish you all a engaging and pleasant conference. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gibson. I want to bring now special remarks to you, and he is a person who is no stranger to any of us who have not only been part of CUNY, but who live in New York. If you are anyone who, if you watch television or if you happen to be listening to the radio, to any particular show, black radio or whatever, you know of a particular individual who's always fighting for the rights of people, particularly our people here in New York City. And he has a special place in the hearts of all CUNY BMI project managers and directors, because he is the one who fought for the funding for this program and all the other programs in the throughout the university. Without his leadership continually, we would not be able to do the things that we do. So I want to bring to you at this time the Honorable Councilman Charles Barron.
I want y'all to get in trouble with me. Say, Black Power! Black Power. Oh, you're too quiet. You're scared. Black Power! Black Power! And you know why I say that? I say it facetiously but very seriously. We have to get power. Blacks and Latinos, this is all about power. Some of my colleagues in the city council said that we should wear a hoodie today. Some of them had to go to the store to buy one. Mine is worn because I always had a hoodie. My brother didn't get killed because he had a hoodie on. Got killed because he was black. We're getting killed right in the Bronx. We don't have to go to Florida. Brother Morale Graham was killed right in the Bronx. Somebody said, "You going to Florida, Charles?" I said, "No, I'm going to the Bronx." We have to stand up and let this system know that there are consequences for taking our lives. We cannot continue to allow people to kill us. And then we continue to have press conferences and forums, and we must, and try to raise consciousness, and we must. But we have to send a strong signal to this system that business cannot go on as usual when you're murdering us. Because that's what they're doing. They're murdering us. They get on me sometimes because of my rhetoric. I say things like, for my black mental health, I'm going to slap the first white man I see in power and tell him it's a black thing. They got mad. On the Sean Bell's thing, they said, what do you think about the Sean Bell killing? I said, we're not the only ones that could bleed. Keep it up. There's going to be a social explosion. They said they got mad at that rhetoric. Some people say extreme things. You are lucky that we're talking. You're lucky that we want to even engage in rhetoric. We can't even walk through our neighborhoods without some police officer stopping and frisking you and asking you for ID and where you're going. How many people in here have been stopped and frisked by the police? Raise your hand. Look at that. You know what I do in my neighborhood? I'm from East New York. I drive around in my neighborhood at least 2 hours a week. And I'm telling all the elected officials, all black leaders, all clergy, if you're somebody in our neighborhoods, drive around like I do. 2 hours a week, I see a police officer stop one of my brothers or sisters, I jump out the car. And I went up to the police officer and I said, you can't do this. He said, sir, you're interfering with my work. I said, sir, you're interfering with my work, because he is my work. And then one of them put their hands on me, and I knocked his hand off me. And he said, sir, you just put your hands on a law enforcer. I said, sir, you just put your hand on a lawmaker. I make the law that you enforce. We got to let them know. And then I said, why did you stop him? You have to have probable cause to stop him and reasonable suspicion that he has something on him. You have neither, because I watched you. He was just coming off the train with his school books, walking home, and you rolled up on him. Give him back his ID and leave him alone. You're not stopping him. And then since you did stop him, write it up. 684,000. Good thing I did that, because the brother felt good. The cop let him go, and the brother said, thank you. I said, now get down in the movement. So y'all got to join the movement. You got to join an organization. You got to get involved. Every chance I get another guy, I stopped another guy. I said, give him back his ID. This is illegal. It is illegal, unconstitutional, against your human rights for somebody to stop you from moving about freely in your neighborhood. That's a human rights violation. Stopping you and writing you up for loitering, for standing in front of your building, loitering, riding a bike on the sidewalk. Come on, man. Take that to the white neighborhood. It's so bad, then stop the white kids. Stop them from doing all of that stuff. They don't do that over there. They do that to our neighborhoods. We got to get it together. This is the greatest opportunity we have. This is what I want to leave with y'all, and I'm out of here. Anyway, I'm out of here. But we have to make sure that we understand power. You have to understand power. Power is your ability to make political or economic or social decisions in your best interest. You have to have the power to do that. If you don't have that political or economic power, somebody else does. You're a 21st century slave. They're the ones that determine the power in our neighborhoods. And this is what I'm trying to get my city council colleagues to understand. New York City is the #1 city in the world. The most powerful city in the world is New York City. We, people of color, blacks, Latinos, and Asians, we are the new majority in New York City. The #1 city in the world, you are the majority. Whites are minorities. They don't even want you to get rid of the term. They call us the minority majority. No, we ain't. You're the minority, and we're the majority. The city council that passes the budget, a $70 billion budget, the city council that passes all the laws for the police and everybody else, the city council that determines what's going to be built on city-owned land in your neighborhoods, has the power to make those decisions, and people of color are the new majority on the city council. 14 blacks, 11 Latinos, and 2 Asians. 27 to 24 whites. We have the power. So what are we doing passing a budget that cuts money from education, that cuts money from higher ed, that shuts down youth centers, that cuts back on the youth summer employment program? How are you going to have 140,000 youth applying for summer jobs, and you cut it down from 53 slots to 23,000, 53,000 slots to 23,000 slots? We don't have to pass that kind of budget. We have to put pressure on black leaders to not be afraid to be black. Matter of fact, let's go up to all of them and just tell them to say black. Make them just say black 3 times. Say black, black, black. We got to be bold enough to stand up to people in power and let them know that we're not going to take it anymore. And we're going to exercise the power that we have. We could change this stuff overnight in our communities. Got a black president, everybody's going to vote for him. I'm solid for him, but I supported him last time. But a black president doesn't mean that you're going to have some black freedom. Black president doesn't mean that we're going to eradicate poverty in our neighborhoods. We don't have an option. Nobody else out there but Obama. The other fools on the other side, oh my God, they better not get in us. We're really in trouble. So we don't have an option there, but we're not going to sit back and let Barack Obama or David Patterson when he was governor, or Mayor Dinkins when he was a mayor, all of whom I know, we can't let them off the hook. They have to serve the black community, and they have to do for us what we've done for them. We supported them. Now they need to support the black community, and if you can bring billions of dollars to those crooks on Wall Street, then bring some money to the hood. Bring some money to Harlem and Jamaica, and bring some money to East New York and Brooklyn and Brownsville. We got to make sure that they are held accountable. On a national level, we got to fight for our fair share of a $3 trillion budget. They have money. They said they're broke. They're broke. They said we're in an economic crisis. $3.8 trillion national budget, but they're broke. $3 trillion for wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, but they're broke. $132.5 billion state budget, broke. $68 billion city budget, but they're broke. I want to be that kind of broke. Break me like that. That's how I want to be broke. They got money. They just don't have money for you. And we got to fight to make that happen, because I think we could turn this thing around with this generation. This generation has to stop killing each other. This generation has to stop listening to things that don't empower you, that don't liberate you. Use language that liberates you, empowers you. But none of this stuff has to be if our leadership would be stronger, if our leadership would make a commitment to our liberation. We have a man of history here, Dr. Ron Daniels. Give him a big hand clap. Dr. Ron Daniels was around and one of the key players in the Gary, Indiana Convention in 1972. Over 10,000 black people came together to talk about power and a black agenda. We have to get back to that. Don't let them fool you. Don't listen to everything you're reading in the media about our leaders. Here's where I'm really getting in trouble, and I'm finished. Peter Noel is here. How you doing, Peter? Give Peter a big hand. Oh, Minister Hafeez Muhammad. Give my friends a good hand clap here. I appreciate them. Here's where I'm going to get in trouble, then I'm going to leave. Don't let them tell you who our friends and who our enemies are. I say this, and I get in trouble everywhere I go, but so what? Muammar Gaddafi, with all of his shortcomings, was an African liberator. Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, who they murdered, was a liberator. He was talking about the United States of Africa. Don't let them have you thinking your leaders are terrorists. One president's terrorist sometimes is another president's freedom fighter, even in their circles. Ronald Reagan called Osama bin Laden an Afghani freedom fighter when Russia was in Afghanistan. Then when Russia's out of Afghanistan and the United States wants to take it, now Osama bin Laden becomes the world's #1 terrorist. Saddam Hussein, who they killed also, he was America's friend when he was fighting the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran. He was on the payroll of America. Then when they finished with him there, he became their enemy, and they killed him. Watch when they call in people terrorists and your enemies. Robert Mugabe, with all of his shortcomings, is taking the land back from whites in Zimbabwe. He's an enemy. Watch when they do that. The Black Panther Party, that I was so proudly to be a member of, and still am a Black Panther to my heart. We were terrorists. We were enemies. Malcolm X was an enemy. And they talked about Martin Luther King like a dog. Have his birthday and all of that now, but when Dr. King was alive, he was under more surveillance than the Black Panther Party. We have to make sure that we are very clear on who our friends are and who our enemies are. Don't listen to the New York Post, the Daily News, or the Wall Street Journal, or the New York Times to define who your friends are and who your enemies are. So brothers and sisters, I just wanted to come to say we're going to be free because no form of our oppression is ever permanent. All forms of oppression are temporary. Don't believe in the invincibility of racism, and yes, it's still here even if you have a black president. Don't believe that they can't be beaten. We're going to win. We just need to get you to understand and believe that. That's why we built the Freedom Party. And we're going to keep building it because the two-party system isn't working. And we're going to win. So I just want to let you know today, if you remember nothing else, no form of our oppression is permanent. It's temporary, no matter how entrenched it seems. 2 examples and I'm finished. One is Nelson Mandela. Who would have thought that he would go from the prison to the presidency of South Africa? Somebody told Nelson Mandela in his 20th year in prison, if you just denounce violence, we'll let you out because you're going to die in here. Apartheid's not going nowhere. Well, it's not going, but he went out of prison and became the president of South Africa. Another example right here. I'll leave you with this one because she's one of my greatest sheroes, and that's Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was bold, enslaved. She was beaten so badly that she used to black out. Harriet said, you know what? I'm getting up out of here. She put a Bible in one hand, said, I'm going to pray for some of you, and she put a gun in the other hand. Said, the rest of you better not turn around because I'm not losing a passenger. Harriet Tubman walked from the south to the north. I drove from New York to Florida and had a fit. She walked from the south to the Bronx. Somebody told Harriet Tubman that plantation slavery was forever. Don't even bother trying to escape. They'll cut off your limbs. They'll kill you. She said, any place is better than here. And she walked from the south to the north. She went back 19 times and freed over 300 enslaved Africans. Give Harriet Tubman a big hand clap. If she could do that then, what is your excuse? And I'll be honest with you, your brothers know that's a brave act. I would have gotten the first 15 of you out, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Whoever didn't come on that first trip, see ya. I'm not coming back for you. This is the kind of courage we have in our movement. This is why we're going to win. We are African people. We built the first civilizations. We taught the world mathematics and science. We gave the world civilization. Nobody should ever feel bad or not like your blackness. The darker you are, the prettier you are. The more coarse your hair is, the richer it is. I wish my nose was so wide it went from ear to ear. I wish my lips were so full you'd bump into them 6 feet in front of me. I wish I was so black you couldn't see me at night. We are a beautiful people, and we need to take that message back to our neighborhoods and say we are the first people on the planet, and man, we're going to be the last people. God bless you and power to the people.
Personality and co-host on Sunday night's most popular talk show, The Week in Review. He's known as the show as the flamethrower, Peter Noel, and when he comes up here, you'll probably see why. He's described as bold and brash in his commentary on contemporary issues in politics in New York City and the nation, with one of the most unique voices on talk radio. He has been one of New York City's most sought-after reporters for over 20 years. From 1990 until 2001, Peter was an investigative reporter for the Village Voice. Let us give a hand to Mr. Peter Noel, the flamethrower.
Oh, man, what an introduction. Brother Charles, thank you, Brother Quash. I can't follow Charles Barron at all. When I covered Charles Barron at the Village Voice, when I was the so-called black beat reporter, you had to find a way to put over what black activists were saying. Not that whites could understand it, but that they could stomach it. And I had this particular skill of doing that. And it's only because these guys knew what to tell me. I looked at Charles Barron and all these other activists, Reverend Sharpton, Stephen Mason, Alton Maddox, and all these other people, as the people who actually told white folk back then, where to go. And it was a challenge for me. I enjoyed doing it. My editors too, because of course we were a bunch of lefties at the Village Voice, we enjoyed doing that. But there was a sense, there was a purpose in what we did. We wanted the people in New York City to understand that you can't, or especially white folks, the ones who hated us, that you couldn't tell us when to mourn. We couldn't mourn on cue for you. Like some of my colleagues, like Wayne Barrett and all the others, were trying to tell us, when you demonstrate. Used to call up Reverend Sharpton and say, why are you doing this? And of course, they didn't know that Reverend Sharpton, Charles Barron, and all these other people had a constituency that they had to answer to. But we weren't taking our cues from white folk. We don't tell us when to do it. We would do it exactly when the times demanded. So I'm here today to ask a little provocative question, whether or not we're living in a post-racial society, and there's a whole lot of answers I think you can get, and it's kind of provocative. But something we do at the station every Sunday is push our audience, not to accept the the common understanding of what we're living, where we're living, and who we are dealing with in society. You know, I see my good friend, Charles Barn here, almost call him Reverend, wearing the hoodie. And it's not that I'm against the hoodie. Some of my white friends called me and asked me, you know, I'm wearing the hoodie for Trayvon Martin. I said, nobody would suspect you at all. You could wear 10 hoodies. Nobody would suspect you. What you need to do is stand up and say that you are with me. You need to walk with young black men in the streets at night too. Follow them, walk with them, and see exactly what happens to them. You know, and I'm the only one, I say. I'm the only one in this city, perhaps in this country, who appeared on the front cover of the Village Voice with my 16-year-old son and told America, it was a very, very provocative piece called If a Cop Kills My Son. And at the time, this was not some vigilante piece. I was doing this because I love my son, this little big-eyed boy that I spit out. You know, and I'm saying that if any cop, black or white, unjustifiably kills my son, this is not some vigilante thing. I laid it out. I laid it out how he came out from his mama's belly. I laid out what my hopes are for him. I laid out the depth of grief that African-American parents feel for their slain sons. Anyone, any cop, any white man in this country, and this is not some vigilante thing. I'm not advocating any violence. You take my son's life unjustifiably, or 2 sons I have now, I'm coming after you. My life is over. I'm taking your life. All right, so that was a little introduction. So the speech I've actually written, a little introduction is, distinguished members of the panel, you're called upon to debate unbridled passion and intellect, the black male crisis in America. Your argument, opinion, and dogma must sway this court of public opinion one way or the other. But there's no doubt in my mind that we all agree that we are here today to counter what Dr. Joanza Kunjufu calls the conspiracy to destroy black boys. Just in case you have been lulled into the false sense of security by the post-racial America conciliators, let me remind you, members of the panel, that for generations we have been at war with white patriots who want to take America back to the days of summary lynching and no blacks allowed communities. This is for real. The investigation into the Trayvon Martin case in Florida seems to follow the scandalous pattern of the Stephen Lawrence case in England and the subsequent passionate debate about the black male crisis. Nearly 20 years ago, Lawrence, the teenage son of Jamaican immigrants, was set upon by a gang of white thugs and stabbed to death in the southeast London neighborhood. Earlier this year, 2 of his unrepentant killers finally were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Why do I bring up this case when there is ample precedent in this country of similar acts of barbarism, you ask? I cite the Stephen Lawrence case because it has generated all of the racial overtones we are witnessing today following the killing of Trayvon Martin by an alleged mixed-race assassin. I cite it because I feel it in my gut that the Trayvon Martin case may be grinding toward the same conclusion. In England, an inquiry found that the Lawrence case, race hate case, may have been solved sooner had the Metropolitan Police not deliberately perverted the course of justice. The inquiry concluded that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist. The questions: are we living in a post-racial society? Can we hope for a similar finding of institutional racism after an investigation of the Stanford Police Department in Florida, so that we can argue without fear of condemnation that such a finding is applicable to most, if not all, departments in America? Police departments in America? I am honored to present a panel of experts who are eager to edify you with their thoughts and answers and solutions. Of course, the person right next to me here is Dr. Ron Daniels. I've debated and argued and fought with this man over the years on the radio. Pretty much we are on the same track. We have different ways of achieving what we call liberation, but pretty much we're going toward the same goal. I do have a Bible. I don't have a gun, but others do. And we come together most of the times at these forums, you know, to trash it out and to say, look, we are on the same track. The provost, Dr. Griffith, I don't know very well, but your reputation precedes you. Dr. Muhammad here, I call him Dr. Muhammad, he and I, when I was writing at the Village Voice covering the Nation of Islam, the only black beat reporter who could get near Minister Muhammad and some of these other people for the Nation of Islam and asked them the tough questions that needed to be answered. They were fighting racism in their own way. And pretty much everything came together. Minister Farrakhan came together with Reverend Sharpton, Viola Plummer, Charles Barron, Sonny Carson, Alton Maddox. They had to come together on the issues, regardless of how much they say that they had disparate views and that they were not together. They came together at the end. So I am posing the question again, are we really living in a post-racial society? The question I will pose to my good friend, Dr. Daniels first. Are we living in a post-racial society?
Well, I think you already answered that, so...
No, I want to hear you tell me something that I have forgotten.
Well, you didn't really forget anything. I think everybody... Well, I think there are some who have a sense, and in a way it's a hope, because we as African people who have suffered so long in this society that we really wish and hope for a post-racial society. By that I mean a time when race doesn't really matter in terms of our ability to achieve and to move forward. But another way of looking at it would be to ask the question, if a Latino were to be elected president, would that mean all of the issues affecting Latinos would somehow disappear? Or if a woman were to be elected, and we think and hope soon there will be a woman elected president of the United States, would that mean all of the issues that women face would disappear? The answer to that question is no. And the reason why is because of something called structural and institutional questions. The question of race is deeply embedded in the American culture, in the American mind. And so therefore, even though there were Barack Obama, President Obama would not have been elected without the support of a significant number of white people. This could not have happened 40 years ago or 50 years ago. It means that there are some whites in America today who say, well, wait a minute, yes, we're willing to give a person of African descent a chance. But if you really reflect on it, many of the white people I would suspect who voted for Barack Obama also voted for him because he was not a person who raised the issue of race. He didn't talk about the issues affecting black people. He was seen as someone who did not raise, quote, racial grievances. So white people felt a little bit more comfortable with him. And, of course, now he's in a box because when these issues get raised, and you saw this the other day, he said that if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. Immediately he was attacked by the fading candidacy of one Newt Gingrich, who has attacked us over and over again. So the president's in a very uncomfortable position. So let me just answer the question by saying, no, we don't live in a post-racial society. And the challenge to all of us, including our young brothers and sisters who are out in this audience, is to begin to take on the challenge of other generations. As Charles Barron, Councilman Barron said, that we're not going to take it anymore. In the city of New York, for those black and brown people, but let's just stick on black people for a minute, who are under the age of 30 years old, the unemployment/jobless rate is 50%. 50% of young black men do not have jobs. That is a state of emergency. Now, why is that? Is because something wrong with us? Because we are bad people? We have a bad culture? No, it's because the system structurally has not addressed our concerns or our needs. And the problem is, there was a time when you could say in the civil rights era, because there is this problem, given the long history of black people who have suffered, bled, and died, and who helped make this country what it is, you could address it. Now, you're not allowed to do that, because if you're doing that, it's unfair to white people. And so we're in a really, really bind. So to conclude on this round, we really do have to fight back. Yeah. We really do have to resurrect the concept of race and racism and what it means and how it affects us. And these young people in this audience will have to be the ones who really make the decision, because your lives are being impacted. You have got to make the decision that you're not just going to be acted on, that you're going to begin to learn your history, use that history as a tool to really fight back, to take us the rest of the way.
Mr. Muhammad, look, I was chastised on the show last Sunday for, just to piggyback on what Dr. Daniels was saying, I was chastised for saying that I believe that Barack Obama's identification with Trayvon Martin was self-serving, that it was political. He knew he's fighting for his political life, that he may not win this one. So suddenly he feels our pain. Suddenly, the President of the United States feels he can speak out now on a case he feels is safe. He feels is safe. When hundreds of black men in this city, people, parents whom you have counseled, who have lost their sons to police aggression and to white aggression in the city. Am I wrong for saying that? It's because this is part of this post-racial America thing. Am I wrong for saying that? Do you believe the president is genuine? Do you believe that the president should speak out more? The type of message he should be sending is that all black men, young black men, are my sons?
Thank you for that. It's an honor to be here this morning. I hope you can hear. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You don't need the mic.
Thank you for that. It's good to be here. Dr. Daniels, good to see you this morning. To their students that are present here this morning and from different learning institutions, number one, we've never been in a post-racial society in America. America in her formation was always formed for Caucasian people. And the root of it has been for the continuance of their race. And if they have a choice, they will always choose their race over any other race. That's why other human beings are called aliens, when the real alien is the American people who were the dregs of society coming out of England. These are the actual facts of the world. Now, brothers and sisters, President Obama, from the moment, Peter Noel, he was elected, he never could become the black president, Minister Farrakhan said. He would always have to be the American president. He won by 65 million votes. His opponent lost by 57 million votes. That means that the country was polarized even in 2004. And when you fast forward to the hundreds upon hundreds of attacks on his character, the attacks on the First Lady of the White House, never done before, on her glutamus maximus, on whether they're eating watermelon or eating chicken, lets you know the kind of white supremacy that's embedded in persons' minds. I believe President Obama is sincere. However, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Daniels, he is in a catch-22 situation. Damn if you do, damn if you don't. He has run as the American president, but he's never shrunk that he's a black man. Now think of this now. Think of this. They always focus on his mother. And we don't mind that his mother's Caucasian. But why there's never focus on his black father? Never focus on that. Everything is on the focus of his mother and the pain of his mother, but his father had a role at some point in his life. Yes, he left him. See, so there's a crisis they're dealing with that. So as long as the president speaks to American issues and never uses his office or the bully pulpit of his office to speak directly to open injustice, then he can be reelected again. But if he begins to take positions that seems to ignite the black, the brown, the Hispanic, the Native American, referred to as the Indian, because brothers and sisters, as I close this point, you are on the rise. But we have an open enemy that does not want you to see that it is your time to rise in America and begin to change the body politic of America, change her spiritually and morally. Those of you who are young Muslims in schools, Christians in schools, Hebrews, those who don't have no thought or persuasion at all, your young minds are on the rise. And Peter, the goal is to destroy the young mind of the black students, to destroy the ability that you have the ability to lead and get us out of this condition. So therefore the Trayvon Martin case becomes the greatest travesty 3 days before they reported the young man. 3 days. Now, listen to this now. You want to believe a story that he fought the officer who had a gun when all he had to do was tell the young man, I got a weapon, I'll use it. He hit him in the head, tried to take your gun. You know why they're spinning that story? Because the young brother is dead. He's not here to speak for himself. And so you're going to tell all kind of lies. So don't believe the hype, brothers and sisters. Learn to think outside the box. And that's what the president is trying to do, but he's caught in between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, Minister Muhammad, you know, if the president hears you today, man, I think he would give you a call and say, I really, have my faith in black people regardless of who they are. You should be calling Minister Farrakhan as far as I'm concerned, who has some choice words for him. Dr. Griffith, the president has, as far as I'm concerned, sets the tone about race in this country. If the President of the United States truly delivers a speech about racism in this country, letting it all hang out, using the so-called N-word, I hate to use that phrase, and laying out what they call us, what white folks call us, and how we in turn refer to white folk. Should the President of the United States call a special session of Congress and give that type of speech? And what should he say?
I want to begin by thanking Jonathan and the organizers for the invitation and for you helping to make it a success by your presence before I respond to the good question. Part of the challenge of leading is not only having a sense of what is appropriate to be done. Part of the challenge of leading also requires a sense of strategy of when, and a sense of strategy of by whom. And very often, some leaders fail because they complicate the what and the when and the by whom. That is no different for the President of the United States. He has to be manifestly, in his first term, judicious about not only what he does, he has to be judicious about when he does it, and he has to be judicious about who gets involved in the doing of it. And so my sense of the utility, the necessity of convening a special session of Congress to talk about racism is it may be the necessary and right thing to do. It is not the necessary and right thing to do now. It is also not necessarily the best thing for him to lead. And that good question gives me an opportunity to share just a few sentences by one of the people who I would envisage in the second term of the Obama administration to be part of the by whom in leading that conversation. The person to whom I'm referring is the Attorney General of the United States. This is what he said in his first Black History Month lecture at the Department of Justice. I'll read you a few sentences. Though this nation has proudly thought of itself as an ethnic melting pot, in things racial we have always been and continue to be, in too many essentially, a nation of cowards. Though race-related issues continue to occupy a significant portion of our political discussion, and though the many unresolved racial issues face this nation, we average Americans simply do not talk enough with each other about race. Here are final two sentences. And yet, if we are to make progress in this area, we must get comfortable with one another enough to be tolerant and talking about race. I would argue that the Attorney General would be part of a cohort of the by whom to be engaging the conversations about race, because it is not only when it is done, it is not only how it is done, it's not only what it is being done, and so I don't think it's appropriate now for Barack Obama to be leading that conversation.
Dr. Griffith, all right. I'm a little bit perturbed by this. Should we wait then for the second term when Barack Obama would show his true color? It says that the president will do a lot more in the second term, that he's just biding his time, and I don't have that kind of faith. I don't believe that, and I voted for the President of the United States because I wanted to be part of history. But all of that novelty thing about the first black president has worn off for me. And Mr. Muhammad and Dr. Griffith, and I don't know if Dr. Daniels is part of this, I believe that even though you're the President of the United States, all white presidents did a lot, did what they can do for white folk.
That's right.
Why can't you recognize that there's more than 51% unemployment in a speech, Mr. President? Recognize that it hurts us more. Unemployment situation hurts us more. Why couldn't the President of the United States recognize that in a speech? Why? Because the Republicans might attack him, that he can't say it now, he should wait 4 more years when he wins re-election and he can, as he tells the President of Russia, may have a little more flexibility. Would you have that flexibility with that type of Congress? Should he be waiting? Should we wait on another 4 years? Why do we have to wait another 4 years? Dr. Griffith, I want you to extend your answer, and I will come to Dr. Daniels on that question too. Why should we wait another 4 years? Do we have another 4 years?
We have another 4 years and we will re-elect him. But I would say, if you were to take a look at even the last 2 decades of presidential leadership, and look at the presidents who have been re-elected to a second term, and you look at their calculus for what their game plan is. Ronald Reagan, it was manifestly part of his design to have certain goals pursued overall in his presidency. But when you pursue and how you pursue certain goals depend upon not only the favorability, not only on the composition of Congress, not only are who are the governors, but a game plan that says if you want to really make, coming back to a point that Ron Daniels raised, some of the institutional changes, you've got to have a longer term strategy. And I would argue whether it's Barack Obama, and especially since it's Barack Obama, you've got to have a longer term strategy. And that strategy has got to be in terms of, look, you know, a lot of us focus on Barack Obama for not delivering. That may be true. But some of the deliverables are not within his power. He needs Congress in a certain lineup to do it. And so I would argue that part of the strategy has got to be, how do I align the forces? How do I have more democratic governance? How do I have more people who are Democrats in the Senate and the House? How do I create the basis for an institutional game plan where some deliverables may be permanent beyond a one term? And so I would say, yes, he is subject to criticism for some things that are not done, but I would say let's be mindful that it's not only the what, it's not only the when, it's the by whom. And he needs alliances in Congress, he needs gubernatorial leadership. It's got to be part of a grander strategy.
But Dr. Daniels, he can make executive decisions on race in this country. The president has the power, the executive power. He can come out and he doesn't have to wait for Congress. He can come out and make a speech on race. Is it an executive decision? I want to talk to America. And maybe he should go to the Attorney General and rewrite a speech or take some of those same words and use it. Should he?
Well, he even pulled the Attorney General back on that matter.
He did. Why?
Just a matter. Well, just flamethrower.
Well, I'm here to provoke. I'm not here to give me nice answers. I'm here to provoke.
Yeah. Well, you're being provocative. But let's look at this. I share and have written about this, the whole sense that Barack Obama actually could do more. Because nobody's asked him to say black power. On the issue, for example, of unemployment, almost all the organizations, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Urban League, certainly Reverend Jackson and others have talked about targeting. So if you're going to have a jobs bill, one of the ways that you get at the question of black unemployment is simply to say we will target these jobs to where you have the highest level of unemployment that would achieve that goal. So some of us are disappointed that some of the opportunities that President Obama has had, he's not utilized, right? And so now we face a new election. And then let me be clear that if I have a choice between President Obama and Newt Gingrich, there is no choice. If I have a choice between him and Romney, who doesn't even know who he is because he's a political chameleon, there is no choice. And between Rick Santorum, who is like a Neanderthal in terms of conservatism, there is no choice. And so I can't sit on my hands and sort of say, well, Obama has not done and and then sort of allow one of them to become president of the United States. Because, and this is where our students, this is why education is so important. These are big questions that require thinking, require thought. We are one Supreme Court justice away from another Plessy versus Ferguson moment. Because you sit on the Supreme Court of the United States, there's no such thing as quote-unquote impartiality at one level. The Constitution of the United States is interpreted by human beings. And you're either conservative, you're liberal, you're moderate. That's what impacts how you see the Constitution. You're hearing that being fought out right now on this whole health care issue, for example, whether it's going to be conservatives or liberals who prevail on this question. So here's my thought. I think we have an obligation. I don't want to be a part of seeing the first black president be defeated, because we also know this. More hate groups have emerged since Barack Obama was elected. People are buying guns in unprecedented numbers. More hate groups. Because there are some people in this country who wake up every day and get a headache over the fact that there's a black family in the White House. And they really resent it. A minority of white America does. So I don't want to play into that scene where we're going to allow the right-wing conservatives who've never been in our interest or nobody else's interest, including women, lesbian and gay people, labor, I don't want to see them elected. So what I want to do is elect President Obama. And then it seems to me that we also have a challenge. That is to say, if we want Obama to do certain things, we need to be in the streets more massively demanding that it happen. We need to be mobilizing and organizing, because that also gives him the political space to make certain kind of judgments. Obama said this when he was elected. He said, change comes from where? The bottom up. He's talked about the fact that really in a way he was saying, go out there and help build a movement out there that gives me some political space to do some of these things. And so, yes, Peter, I'm saying let's reelect President Obama. I've been a little muted this term, but I will be less muted next term, because we do have to change what's happening in our community. We do expect President Obama to, if he can address Native Americans, if he can address Latinos, he can also find a way to address these issues that affect us. But I don't want to make the mistake, as the provost is saying, of having my timing off. I want to get him reelected first. And then I want to step to the brother nicely and say, brother, you got to do something about what's going on in our community, because we're the ones who helped put you where you are.
Good luck with that, Dr. Daniels. Dr. Griffith, follow up.
I want to pick up on two things that Ron said. And this is just a rhetorical question. Think of what would happen to Obama's presidency and potential for re-election if he were to deliver a speech, especially now about racism. We don't want to try to focus on winning a battle and losing the war. But here's my second observation. And my second observation picks up on the E word that Ron used a couple of minutes ago, and that is education. If there is one area that all of us in this room should be able to applaud Obama on being manifestly and consistently in the leadership on, is pushing the education envelope. He is saying, he doesn't have to give a big speech and say minorities, Hispanics, blacks, take the empowerment opportunity of getting yourself education. He is creating the opportunity. And so let's ask ourselves, has there been response by that to that opportunity? The opportunity is pushing significantly education, limiting what banks can do about loans to students, creating more opportunities for community college, creating more opportunity for investment in higher education. And here is what Santorum said. How could he want to have people go to college? He is, what's the word he used?
Well, what do you call it?
Yes.
Black people?
He's a snob.
Oh, snob. Okay, yeah.
This Obama guy is a snob
yes.
because he wants people to go to college. But here is what we all need to remind ourselves. Part of the empowerment that Charles Barron talked about is manifestly and determinedly through education. And so if you want to combat racism, one way to empower ourselves, whether it's you directly who have a job, who need to go to a different level and more earning and more career rather than job, is to get educated or re-educated. So I would say the onus is on us not to look only to Obama to change the landscape of engagement and empowerment. The onus is on us to ask, how might we empower ourselves? One way to do it is to take the opportunity to educate ourselves, our nephews, our children, our spouses.
Minister Muhammad, you had any reaction to that?
Isn't it something that every white president prior to President Obama, even former President Bill Clinton, that they called the first black president, but he never looked like any of us, had the ability to speak about race and handle what they wanted to handle for their people the way they wanted to. But President Obama does not have the same equality to step outside the box and speak to the body politic of a suffering black, Hispanic, Native American, and poor white in this society. That is not freedom, justice, and equality where the office of the president is concerned. He should be able to speak when he wants, as he wants, since he is the president of the United States. Now, we understand wisdom has to be employed, but where's the equality of the matter? Was President Clinton under the same constraints? Was President Bush under the same constraints? Yes, you need a Congress, but what happened when the Democratic Congress had control of the Congress and the Senate and sat on their hands and did nothing to help President Obama, thus losing seats in the Congress? Now he's fighting against Republicans and blue dog Democrats. Let's just speak the truth as it is. It's an uphill battle. He has enemies within his own party fighting against him. Not only Republicans, he has blue dog conservative Democrats. So therefore, the president is pigeonholed. I believe he will get reelected. But understand, when the Republicans determine whether it's Romney or Santorum or whoever it is, that 57 million plus will concretize its forces. And the real fight will be on, not for us just to get the black president back in office, to have a black man in office, but for our own self-sufficiency, because they don't want to see him have another term, because they believe that he will turn his sympathetic heart toward the black cause. They believe that he will turn. And let me say this, he does have executive power to cut mortgages in half, but he's not done it because of the bankers from Wall Street who are on his staff, that's in his eardrum, keeping the money flowing to Wall Street. Let me just say this to you about education, then I'll close. There's a difference between training and education. We need a full and complete education, and when you have education, that's the light of society, my fellow members, you then have a mind to go free. You're here at your college. We go to different colleges and just leave the dog the bones. Well, one day he got an edumacation out there in the woods, and he brought back the bones to the hunter and told him, if I hunt, I eat what I hunt, and if you want to eat, then you take your boots and your camouflage and your gun and hunt for yourself. But if I go out, I'm going to do for myself. That's our problem. The key to our success is we got to do for self, whether President Obama is in for a second term, 3 terms, 41 terms. We got to go for ourselves.
Peter,
that's our estimation.
Peter, I also want to.
Go ahead.
I want to make sure.
Well said.
Yeah. I also want to go back, and I want to address this education question again, because I think a part of what the theme is today is from learning to leadership. I think is what we were talking about.
Yes.
And really the challenge, particularly to young black minds, is to, no matter what happens in the classroom, is that you will commit yourselves to learn for yourself. Charles Barron was up here earlier, the councilman. He said something about and some people might have, some people, I could see some people saying, well, why would he say this? He said that, or it may have been Minister Hafeez who said this, that America was created for white people. Now that sounds like a very provocative statement. But when I teach racial and ethnic politics here at York College, I make the same statement to my students. And then I pull out the documents that show that with the Naturalization Act of 1792, it says just that.
Come on.
And that is repeated several times, this language that meant that this land was largely built initially for white people. not for Asians, not for Chinese, not for Native Americans. In fact, the land was taken away from Native Americans. You need to know that history. But not only that, we get this little glorified history. This country, the struggle that we're looking here is between a group of people who are the conservatives. And that term conservative means that they want to constrict democracy to a few. Because if you understand how this nation was really put together at the beginning, not even, and Minister Muhammad also mentioned poor white people. Initially, voting is important, but not even poor white people could vote in this United States of America. Women could not vote until 1828, as far as white men, because this was a democracy for the few. So there's a big struggle here. So when Barack Obama's in power, it's black people, yes, but it's also whether or not some of your mothers and fathers who work for unions that help build this country for working people, whether or not there's an attack on unions. There's an attack on, there's an effort to constrain the rights of women. All these things are on the table because some of the people, those who are in that 1% that you keep hearing about, they are only concerned about that 1%. And in fact, they're prepared to use racism to keep everybody fighting on the bottom while they, in fact, get away with absolutely murder in relationship to the financial rape of this country. That's what's at stake. And you can't sit on the sidelines. You've got to study. And when Charles Mann talked about the whole thing talked earlier about this whole phenomenon. Yes, we're concerned about Trayvon Martin, and we should be. But this afternoon, somewhere in the city of New York, there's going to be black young men throwing down on black young men.
Exactly what I'm coming to.
And some of it, and by the way, let me just say this, that's not new. People are going to have arguments.
Dr. Daniel, hold that. No, you got to hold it.
Let me finish this point.
All right, finish the point quickly.
That's not new. Yes. Because when I was coming up in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, we were banging. The difference is we did not have AK-47s, Mach 9s. We didn't kill each other if we had an argument. We fought, but we didn't kill each other. We didn't have the weapons to kill each other. And we didn't have the drugs and all these things that are being brought into our community. Sister Betty Shabazz once said, Malcolm X's wife, she said, we may be oppressed, but we do not have to cooperate with our oppressors. We don't have to destroy ourselves.
Dr. Griffith, I'll come to you just now, but since you raised the issue, one of the things that confuses this whole question about the crisis of the black male is that every time we are talking about race in America, every time we are talking about white on black violence, every time we are talking about blue on black violence, which is police on black violence, we tend to bring up this whole thing about black on black violence, and we confuse the issue. Do you believe that if black people, based on what you just said there, if the black people stop killing each other today, white folk will stop killing us tomorrow?
No.
But why do people confuse the issue and say, well, we have to first stop killing ourselves? No, why do we do that? Why do we make that statement and bring the issue all along? We take the focus away from what white folks are doing to us. We take the focus away from actual real racism, and say, let's fight what's happening to us now, when it really doesn't have any correlation at all.
Well, we ought to be able to chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. If they do it, we ought to be able to do two things. It's not that we could do two things. We have a crisis inside of our community. That needs to be addressed. We also have a crisis in terms of the external attack on us. So there's no reason why we can't do both.
I don't want us to confuse
it's
both.
Not a question of confusing.
But do we do that? I think we do it.
I don't think I'm not confused at all. I'm clear that that we need to, in fact, if we were to internally mobilize our own energies and get engaged, we would probably stop killing each other less if we would focus on the real enemy. But because we don't focus on the real enemy, we turn on each other instead of to each other. And because we don't know our history, and we allow things like the N-word to become a part of it. We have a whole generation of people out here who have fought because of the conditions that have occurred, including the disinvestment in our community, including the war on drugs that has created a prison jail industrial complex that has people now glorifying. That's what the sagging is about. That's what the hoodie is all about. And I'm not saying that the people who do it are wrong, but for the first time we have this emulation of mass incarceration. When, Peter, in your life as black people, we always were flamboyant. We had the zoot suits. We always dressed fine. When did sloppy become in? Never in our community has sloppy been in terms of the black community. Never. And so here's the point. We need a cultural revival. We need to return to some of the things we were doing in the 60s in terms of black consciousness. Who are we as black people? The man in the Trayvon Martin case, this brother who they just trotted out, he said that, but there's a certain truth to it. He says, I don't know anybody under 45 who uses coon as a negative. Could you imagine a Jew standing up saying, I don't know about anybody under 45 saying that kite is a negative? I mean, where are we in terms of our own self-esteem? So my point is, if we come to embrace ourselves as black people, and that doesn't mean that we're hostile to anybody in and of itself, but it means internally we build our own black power and we engage in a struggle to advance our interests, including, by the way, some of these corporations out here who are sponsoring some of the right-wing attack on our community, like Walmart, for example. Then all of a sudden we have something we're fighting for and we're not fighting against each other. I mean, if you look at the whole history, you know the history of the Crips and the Bloods and stuff, they didn't start off, some of these groups, they didn't start off as negative. They started off as political movements, not as negative movements. But they've been transformed because of the whole negativity that's surrounding.
I will call you and deal with you later. Dr. Griffith. Yeah.
Three quick points. Coming back to the business of the Republic's birth and for whom. If you get a chance, and this builds on the point Ron said, America was not designed not for all people. It was not even designed for all white people.
That's right.
And if you want to get a powerful sense of the economic underpinnings of the Republic's formation, read a book published in 1913 called An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution. The author is a gentleman called Charles Beard. And what Charles Beard was saying there is that if you look at who and the what of the founding fathers, not only were they not interested in women who were white and poor whites, they were only interested in rich whites and in the creating a superstructure of constitution and laws to protect that. And it is by no coincidence that our union is still trying to perfect a more equal union. So there should be no misunderstanding about what the initial designs were. Whites were not part of it. Women were not part of it. It was for white wealth. Right. But here's my second point. I don't confuse the battle within with the battle from the outside. I think it's important to have conversations and actions about both battles. And we do ourselves great harm in fighting the kind of battle within that allows the battle from the outside to be more successful. Why are more black males not in college rather than on the streets? That is our battle within. Why aren't, we know that there are economic injustices in the whole criminal justice superstructure, but why are we not empowering more of ourselves to not be on those opportunities for the injustice to be perpetrated? What is the big pride in wearing your pants below your butt? What is the pride in having all those not so proudful things where the opportunities for the battle from without to be stronger? I want to cite you something also that Barack Obama said in his State of the Union of last year. He was talking about the importance of education. And he said, would it not be great for us to have as much pride in the athletes as we have in, as much pride in people who are educated as we have in the athletes? Would it not be proudful to have more teachers who have the investment and the pride of their communities? We have not only got to focus on the battle against us, we've got to have realistic conversations about how might we do better. And part of that battle is not only black men. Part of that battle is women. The reality is we still do have, unfortunately, so many women who are mothers and fathers. My second book, I dedicated to 4 women. women who were mothers and fathers. And so we've got to ask, what is the role of the family in this post-racist society? What is the role of the church in this post-racist society? Let's see opportunities where we can, within our community, create more positives, create fewer negatives, and so the battle from the outside can be fought on a more realistic ground. My final point is this. I'm going to assume that we all would have an interest in having Barack Obama reelected. But reelection just does not happen. You've got to get registered. How many of us are registered? You've got to get involved in organizations, whether electronic social media or face-to-face. How many of us are either involved in that way or have a plan to become involved in that way? And so you don't even have to read Shakespeare to remember what he said. Sometimes the fault is not in the stars. The fault is in your own eyes. When you look in the mirror, can each of us realistically say, we are pursuing the educational journey, we are going to organize and get registered, even if it is only on the Facebook? What are we doing to enable ourselves to be empowered for the long haul?
Before we get into the question and answer session, there's one question here concerning the role of the black church, and especially in this city. I would speak to New York City because this is where I live, and because I know some members of the black church. I know some members of the black church to whom the present administration reaches out to whom the present administration has given money to. I'm an investigative report. I could say this and I can back it up. And they have, whenever there is an issue involving race in this city, involving young black men in this city, they call Dr. Flake, they call certain ministers with big churches, especially the prosperity gospel preachers, and they say, keep your people in check. They don't understand what the issues are. They get together on a Sunday, allegedly, and they preach the gospel. But black people walk the street every day. Young black men walk the street every day with their hoodies, of course, with their pants down, and they are permanent suspects. And they ignore that. The black preachers, some black preachers ignore that. But they run and they answer to City Hall. When City Hall calls to say, stop, make a statement about this alleged police brutality. Our cops are doing the right thing. Stop and frisk is easy. Stop and fist, as I call it, is stopping guns. It's taking away guns from these young black men. And these ministers play to that. Minister Muhammad, have you ever been called by the Bloomberg administration at all? I know the work that the Nation of Islam does and has been doing to try to stop violence in the African American community. Do you ever participate in any closed-door sessions, behind-the-scenes sessions with the present administration on how to check the behavior of young black men?
Why would they call a free-thinking black man to sit down with those whose minds are enslaved? I cannot be bought by a dollar. I cannot be bought by silver or gold. You cannot buy my mind, my heart, or my spirit. I represent the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, a free, independent leader. I'm a free, independent man of leadership, under his leadership and from his leadership. Mayor Bloomberg knows us very well, but Mayor Bloomberg wants those that he can keep on the 90-foot carrot stick and be able to feed them as he would like to feed them. He's a businessman that has never been about education of our children in this school. He is a businessman that came in worth $8 billion, now worth $18 to $20 billion. He's a businessman. He's always been about business. I'm sure there's some good things about him that could be brought to the surface. But as far as where we are concerned, he's a businessman. He's the other side of the coin of the former mayor, Rudolph Giuliani. Now let me remind us, we are not in a post-racial society. Your 400-year-old enemy has not all of a sudden become your friend. And the mask of civility of the mind of white supremacy is becoming more prevalent in the world today. Wake up. Only under disasters do you see us come together. Only in death do you see us try to come together. But in between life and death, We are fighting one for another inside of America. And I'm warning us, those who are feeding young minds, we have to feed them the truth. We cannot speak to go along, to get along when our young people are suffering. Many young black men don't want education because there's nothing in there to fully educate them. They don't want the kind of weak, milquetoast kind of education that does not allow them to go free. Now, we have a social responsibility. I'm for education. My eldest stepson, I worked with him since he was 6. He's 32. He has a degree in chemical engineering because I stayed on his backside. My eldest son, after him, will graduate May 19th, Dr. Daniels and Professor, from the University of Plattsburgh with a 4-year degree in business administration. But I want him to go free. My next daughter under him will graduate next year from Lehman College. I want her to go free. We believe in education in the Nation of Islam, but not education to become a modern-day slave. Politics is not the panacea to our ills. Our root problem is a spiritual one that necessitates a spiritual, not religious, spiritual solution from within that drives us morally, drives us politically, drives us economically. Have you ever noticed they don't mind us protesting? 30,000 in Florida plus, but no talk of economics. If every one of us gave $1 that day or $10 a month and we put it into a bank and leverage that for land and leverage it for manufacturing, then you'll see the young black man wake up because now he sees his education being put to work. We live in America, the richest country on the earth, my dear family. Education should be free. Stop spending all of these monies on false wars in the Middle East. And education can be free. But it is not free. It's a scam. And it gets higher every year under CUNY, higher every year under SUNY. Then you go to the private colleges of St. John's and other places, 40,000, 60,000. How can you want people to be educated and they don't have the money to pay for the education? They don't have the freedom to be educated in this country. It is a lie. And we must now put out fire to burn up the lies that are out there. So I'm letting you know for everybody from now, and I thank you for, you have me year after year, time after time. I appreciate it. But I'm not going to hold my tongue from the truth while we got minds sitting in front of us, because we don't know when we're going to see you again. So I appreciate everything that has been said. I can agree with it to a point, but at another point, brothers and sisters, we must go free. It is time now that within America, whatever she was in her creation, she's not that now. We are here. We have given our blood, sweat, and tears, Peter Noel, and we deserve America. She is ours. We're not going back nowhere. We'll go wherever we want to go. But this part of the country is ours, and we intend to take control of it. And it's not going to be the black over the white. We want a universal government of peace wherein we all can live together in peace with freedom, justice, and equality. That's all I want to say.
That's the kind of fire I remember from, but I used to call him Minister Kevin, but he's not now Minister Kevin. But that's the fire I remember when I have written something about the Nation of Islam and it wasn't too nice. Minister Kevin, as I remember then, he would come to me, not in a violent way, but in that kind of powerful way to lay out exactly why things should not be in a certain way. I'm for education too. But again, there was a struggle, Dr. Daniels, back in the 90s about black studies, Afrocentric studies, and whether or not it should be taught, how we are revisionist historians, where we teach black history. So are they teaching giving us this type of education to young people about who they are, about the history of this country, about where they come from? No. They don't want you to study that. So they want you, so you have to go to an all-black college, or you have to go to a predominantly black college to get that type of information.
Peter, I'm sorry.
It's not in the national curriculum.
Can I just say this?
Go right ahead.
Black studies is now called multicultural affairs.
Okay.
Because you don't want anything black.
All right.
Multicultural affairs, because we got to include everyone, but everyone does not include us. Think about that.
Yeah, we don't study our own history. Okay, it's time for some questions. Don't throw any questions at me. It's for the panel. Okay? These are the experts. I'm just here to provoke them. Questions? You got to come to the mic, sir. Minister Muhammad, very well said, very well said. And Dr. Daniels, I know you're going to call me later and tell me some things. I'm waiting for that call. Yes, sir. Speak into the mic.
Yes, so hello. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Question about the black family. My concern is the role that men take or haven't taken in the construction of the black family, because there's no people who have ever developed without first developing a family structure. So I'd just like to hear people's comments on what do you think should be done. I know that when I was a young man, Elijah Muhammad had a program to re-educate, I believe they were called civilization classes, where black men were taught civilized behavior and black women were taught civilized behavior. And that was very, very, very helpful to many people who had lost their way. We all are annoyed by the pants on the butt and all of these things, and these show that something is missing. So maybe you can, perhaps, Brother Muhammad, maybe you can address that issue?
Yes, sir, my brother. Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you, brother. We still have those classes. And if we are allowed to come in, we'll civilize the black man. Members of the FOI that are here, stand up, please. They're all around the room. These are men that you see standing before you. Some of them never had a taste of prison. Some of them have. This is only a few. We have hundreds of brothers. We take brothers who come out of the penal systems of America, brothers who come off the street corners of America, and today they are doctors, they are paralegals, they are lawyers, they are engineers, they are teachers, they are architects. Are you listening to me? The fabric. We're not gangbangers. Beautiful men. You may be seated, brothers. Thank you. We have sisters that are here this morning. Our work is a work of reformation. We can take a white person's life with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and turn it around. I've been in a room with white folks in the room, mainly them, and applied what Minister Farrakhan has taught and can transform their lives. So this is not just about dealing with black, because a message to the black man is a message to the black man through the black man for the human family of the planet Earth. But we must have pride in ourselves. And let me just answer this to the point. In black male-female relationships, and I want to say to the young brothers, you have to develop a mind that one day you must, well, not one day, you must respect, but one day that you want to be joined unto your female counterpart, not as a girlfriend, not as someone who backs their thing up. The mind, you got to lift your mind, lift your intelligence. But to the women, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, where there are no decent women, they can and will be no decent men. So you have to stop wanting to back that thing up. You have to stop wanting to give yourself away free to the young brothers. The freakniks have to stop. The freakniks have to stop. The Halloween freaking around on college campuses have to stop. The excessive drinking of the open enemy's firewater called liquor has to stop. Stop drinking all of the Budweisers and the Coronas and the Heinekens and the Coors Light and the Bud Light. You know I'm down your lane. Stop smoking up all of the blunts and the spliffs and the reefer. We have to get away from the negative vices of the world if we ever want to be a strong family. Would you smoke reefer in front of your baby? Why would you smoke it for yourself? Why would you smoke a little 3-inch white god called a cigarette that when you were growing up, Dr. Daniels, when you blew into the white handkerchief, the yellow nicotine would be in the handkerchief. Now when you blow today, it's not in the handkerchief, it's clear because it's going directly in your lungs. Formaldehyde, embalming fluid, used in embalming bodies. I'm a Muslim. When Muslims die, we wrap the body. I know what it is to be in a morgue, in a mortuary, and smell formaldehyde. Why would we smoke that? Why would we drink that? This is killing the fabric of the family. Can't you see the design? Big liquor stores in our community. Arabs running stores, and we come like little pack rats in the middle of the night getting our little soda and our chips, but they won't open the door because they're afraid. The hell with them. Let them close down. Either open your doors where we can walk through, or we'll come to you in the morning. Sisters, you got to lift your mind. Muslim sisters that are here, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, one learned Muslim is harder on the world of shaitan than 1,000 ignorant worshipers. Women, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, nations come through you. You must be intelligent to feed the babies that you're bringing into the world. But then don't have babies premature. Stop hooking up with an emotionally bankrupt young black man who's not ready. He deals with the muscle between his leg, but not the muscle between his head. And the same thing with you sisters. So black man, you'll raise the pants up when we raise the mind up. But if you leave the mind the way it is, then the pants are going to get even lower and lower.
If you have any questions, please come to the mic. I know you have a lot of questions. Please come. Line up, please, behind this gentleman. Come. I know you have these questions. You have questions. Bring it. We also want to talk about, have some questions that consider discussion on Barack Obama. Please. You know, this is your president, and it was perhaps one of the most provocative aspects of this conversation we had this morning.
Yes,
I also want to talk about the impact the Trayvon Martin case has had on young black men today who in protest are wearing their hoodies. And they are being stopped more than ever now because they're wearing those hoodies in solidarity with Trayvon Martin's family. How do you guys combat that, young people going to college? I would like to know that, okay? So
we also want to encourage you young people to come to the microphone. Okay. You young people out there to come to the microphone.
Dr. Griffin has a quick comment before you.
I've got to go in a few minutes, and I just want to make a couple of observations before I depart with apologies. Not only do we teach black studies at your college, you can have a minor in black studies. As a matter of fact, one of the requirements for graduation, one of the options allows you to take something called cultural diversity. But we're going a step further, and this is the leadership of some of the professors in the Department of Social Studies. Beginning fall 12, what formerly was known as African American Studies will be known as Black Studies.
Excellent.
We are not apologizing for the importance of education.
Right, be free.
We are not apologizing for the importance of educating appropriately. That's point number one. Minister referred to the drinking, and I've always been amused and sometimes baffled. And this is not only true of young folk, but grown folk. We sometimes spend more money on alcohol than on books.
That's right. Go ahead, Professor.
We spend more money on the weekend at the pub or at the bar or the club than an educational opportunity for a study abroad or study someplace other than in New York. And I think it suggests that we need to rethink what the priorities are and how we fund those priorities. Yes, you can have the booze, but it is appropriate and necessary to also think of the books. In broad terms, whether electronic or hard, think of the books, not just of the booze, as something you want to make an investment in. But I want to leave you with if you walk around campus, not only in this building, you'll find a number of what are called provost favorite quotes. And there is one by Benjamin Mays that I want to leave with you, and I'm going to leave copies of it with you. Because for me, not only was Benjamin Mays a distinguished president of Morehouse College, not only was Benjamin Mays a distinguished American, not black American, but American educator, an author, Benjamin Mays was an important role model, and part of what needs to be done in families on one-on-one is mentoring, is role modeling. And I want to leave with you, and I'm going to read before I leave, the quote that I have from Benjamin Mays that focuses on the importance of not only black young men, but not only black women, all of us having dreams and goals. You can't get empowerment simply by wishing it. You've got to have a goal to pursue, and you've got to pursue that goal. So I'll read to you, and I'll leave you copies, may not have enough for everyone. Just 3 sentences, my Benjamin Mays favorite quote. This is what these sentences are. The tragedy of life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. It isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. I'm going to leave you copies of this quote and encourage you individually to ask, and this is my message request to the students, what are your goals? What are your dreams? How might you want to individually and then as a family empower yourself, not just for a job, but for building a family, for building institutions that really can make empowerment not simply a platitude, a term, but make empowerment really something that is achievable. Benjamin Mays speaks of the importance of goals and dreams. Each of us need to take a leaf out of Benjamin Mays' books. I've got to run. Thanks for the opportunity to share it.
Thank you, Dr. Griffith. So you have a question?
Not really questions, just want to make some comments.
All right, let's keep it kind of short because we have a lot of people who want to.
Yeah, short. Trevor Blanchard from Campus Magnet. I'm here with a number of students, around 50 students, young men from grade 10 and 11. Comments, and I really want to make a comment with regards to what was said today. One of the things is the whole idea we talked about race, and we didn't define the aspect of race. I just want to kind of define it so some of the students could understand what we're talking about. We're talking about a phenotypical aspect of ourself and a geology of ourself. One of the speakers spoke in terms about the comment in terms of when and by whom. Two ideas of the person involved in terms of leadership. Again, a great debate was W. Du Bois in terms of leadership style, where he said it is the intellectual, the talented the intellectual individual who leads us. The opposite view of leadership is W.B. Booker T. Washington, who says upliftment of the people generally. This is a more accepted aspect in terms which we do in the educational aspect. Again, we talked about one of the comments being made was in terms of the leadership. And we said, well, we could make demands for what we want, but again, that is a reactive process to leadership. Where a more proactive is where we have an agenda.
All right. Okay. Let me let Dr. Daniels tackle that question. You got a question clearly, or you got some things on that?
Well, I have some thoughts about it in terms of what's being said.
Thank you, sir.
One other thing, my quote is, in leaving, my quote is, it says, the rich rob the poor, and the poor rob each other. Thank you.
Well, one of the dimensions that was talked about, and again, this is why the study for our young people in particular, the study becomes important. The provost was talking about black studies, and let me just say, in my generation, in my time, we created black studies. It did not exist in the academy. It was not a part of any school.
That's right.
When I first went to Kent State University in 1971, we were creating a discipline. We stormed these universities and made them create black studies because it was not being taught at the university level. And what I mean by that is I didn't learn black studies by going to to an academy. We had to learn it on our own. We had to teach ourselves. And that's one of the things I want to say to you is teach yourself, study yourself. Listen to what you hear and then make your own judgments about it. Now, W.B. Du Bois talked about the talented tenth. He talked about those who would be the intellectual cream of the race, if you will, providing leadership for the race. And W.B. Du Bois, therefore, was talking about a kind of intellectualism, but he was also, if you know W.B. Du Bois, and you should know who W.E. Du Bois was, one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest scholar produced by Africans in this country. But he also was a man of action because he was involved in the NACP. He helped create organizations, so he was a scholar activist. But there was this notion really of the studied one, that one who really was about ideas, but of putting those ideas to practice. Booker T. Washington came at it a slightly different way, and that was he wanted to teach black people how to do things, how to be mechanics, how to do practical things with their hands and with their skills. And so I don't really think it's an either-or proposition. I think we need to do both. We need to have people who out here have to take great pride in being able to, in fact, I think one of the things that's disappeared is technical and vocational education has sort of disappeared from the scene, and we need to regain technical and vocational education. The reason why I think Du Bois's idea is important is because no matter where you are in life, you need to be able to think critically. That's the message. The intellectual mind, you need to cultivate the ability to think for yourself, and then you can be a carpenter, you can be whatever you want to be. I do a lot of work in Haiti. And in Haiti, probably 80% of the people are illiterate. They cannot read and write. But that doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean that they're not learned, because they listen to the radio.
That's right.
They listen. They are very attuned, more attuned than most black people in America to political events, because they use their mind even if they can't read and write.
That is right.
So my point is cultivating that mind becomes important. So I don't think there's that argument between Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, at least at that level. In fact, at all levels, I think was a dichotomy that could have been bridged, but you need to both be proud of whatever you do. If it's with your hands, if it's a vocation, if it's construction, whatever it is, as Martin Luther King say, do it the best you can do. Always strive for excellence. But we also need to have those who will be the scholars, those who will be the learned ones, who also will take that knowledge and then return it to black people to help us, in fact, as we build and as we grow and as we develop as black people in this country and in the world.
All right, okay, we may have to break soon, but I want to take a question from the young man here on to my right. I'll come to you, my brother. There are three young men. Make it short, quickly, and make your point.
I'm from business, and my name is Cordell.
Can you speak up a little bit, sir?
All right. I'm from business, and my name is Cordell, and I just wanted to ask, like, earlier on, y'all were talking about how cops were stopping black people on the street. I would like to have your idea on, like, when it's going to end.
I can barely understand what you're saying. Maybe it's the acoustics in here.
Yeah.
Stop and frisk. Yeah. Could you elucidate again, sir? What does he want to say about stop and frisk?
When is it going to end?
Okay, good. Great question. Quite frankly, I said I wasn't going to answer any questions. I will go to Minister Muhammad here, and I will tell you something about stop and frisk in a few. I'll come to you too, Minister Muhammad, on stop and frisk.
It will end when, my dear brother, when politicians who should be about the business of leadership become strong enough to deal with law enforcement who reports to them. When we allow law enforcement in any society to become the boss of those who are supposed to be over them, then what you see will continue to go on. Stop and frisk will end when you have a mayor who has the sensitivities of the citizenry of this New York City, who will control his police commissioner. When you have a city council who will become strong enough and have a strong enough speaker who's not trying to run for the office of mayor while being the speaker at the same time, and will call them in and deal with them. And lastly, social responsibility. Stop and frisk will also end when we as black men act better in the society, one to another, and one to our female, and one to our families. We can do a lot to stop police brutality if we stop brutalizing ourselves. That doesn't take it off our enemy, but it has a lot to do with how we handle ourselves.
Dr. Daniels,
go ahead.
Let me just say that I slightly disagree with the minister on that one.
Okay.
For this reason. There's a way in which we have been, and this is why it's important to study, and I'm not saying that in kind of distinction to the minister on that point. There's a book that really captures this, and I would challenge all of you to get this book. It's called The New Jim Crow. It's a book by a brilliant scholar named Michelle Alexandra, and all of you can read it. First of all, I have confidence that every one of you can read this book, because you need to know what is happening to us. We are being targeted as black people because rather than invest in black people in terms of education, housing, and economic development and jobs, they would prefer to see us go to jail.
Without a doubt.
And because of that, the resources that should flow through our community to create the jobs and the economic development are not there. Plus, there's a change in the economy. We don't have the same economy like we used to have with industrial jobs and jobs where you went with a high school education, you could get a good, those jobs are gone. So as a result, we have a tremendous situation where we don't have what we need in our community. As a result, what has happened is the illicit economy, the drug economy has been created.
Right.
And we have a lot of our people who are participating in that drug economy and fighting it over and killing each other over that drug economy. That gives the police department, and I agree with the minister on that, the excuse, and it is an excuse, to then come in and violate our constitutional rights. We do not use drugs any more than white people use drugs, but because we are targeted, we are arrested and sent to prison more than white people are sent to prison.
Agreed.
That is an objective fact.
That's
all
right.
And as a result, we find ourselves again incarcerated, and then they also then use stop and frisk, which is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. You should know the Fourth Amendment. It is a protection against unreasonable search and seizure, and you should not be stopped unless there is a reasonable suspicion or articulable suspicion that a crime is about to be committed, and that is now almost never happening. Now let me just conclude on this point. How do we stop it? Yeah, all those things that the minister said we need to do. But you're not too young to also take action yourself.
Come on.
Suppose if those of you who have been stopped and frisked, rather than us throwing down on each other, to say, look, we're not going to take it anymore. Then on a given day, young black men and black women and all of the supporters said, we're going to march on City Hall. Social media, create your own images and say, we are tired of being stopped and frisked. It's unconstitutional. We're sick and tired. We ain't going to take it no more. You could do that. Nobody, you can lead yourself. You are the leaders we've been looking for. When I was your age, I was already leading an NAACP chapter at 15 years old. So you don't need me. I'm willing to join you. The minister's willing, Charles, all of us are willing to join you. But sometimes you have to take action into your own hands. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee helped launch the civil rights movement when mothers and fathers were nervous and they were taking segregation. They were accepting it. They went to Greensboro, South Carolina, when they weren't supposed to sit on in a lunch counter in Woolworth. They went anyway. They risked their lives. Some of them were beaten upside the head. Some of them were battered and bruised. But they decided that they were going to strike a blow for their own freedom. You can do the same thing. And I challenge you to do that. As young students, organize yourselves and say, I'm tired of being stopped and frisked. We are going to march on City Hall and demand that they stop it.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, quickly, I know we got to run. It's a good book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. But I also wrote a book, took my time to write a book. I'm not here to push my book. But chapter 16 of my book, Why Blacks Fear America's Mayor, Reporting Police Brutality and Black Activist Politics under Rudy Giuliani. Chapter 16, Clothes Make the Suspect. 7 white cops came to me. I'm not violating any undercover stuff here. 7 white cops came to me when I was at the Village Voice. And they say, we have a phrase, it's called ghetto awareness wear, that the NYPD uses. And we use that against young black men. We want to expose this. So my sources told me, write a piece about it because wearing the hoodie accounts for 20% of the stops. The way you angle your hat for anonymity, that accounts for like 10%. Your pants, the way you wear it in a certain way, the way you wear your sneakers, they have percentages that they attach to that. You want it to stop in some respects? I am not saying that if you stop wearing your clothes a certain way that the cops will come at you. They will come at you because of the color of your skin, right? Even though you're wearing a suit. However, you do not want to tempt them. When you wear that hoodie, right, and in a certain way, they see you, they will stop you. Please, if it's not snowing, if it's not raining, I tell my sons, do not tempt these police officers. Chapter 16 of the book, read Michelle's book too, but get this book, Why Blacks Fear America's Mayor, and read that chapter because it is what white cops, white folks say should not be happening to young black men. Sir, how are you? Your question. Yes.
My name is Jason Green, and I represent Our Brother's Guardian. And I just wanted to know why aren't there more volunteer mentors that
Volunteer what?
Mentors, you're talking about more mentors.
Yes.
Why aren't there more mentors? I mean, adults who are mentoring young black men. Dr. Daniels, I'll come to you.
Well, that's a good question, and I think we have, in many respects, abdicated our responsibility, and I think we should be, and I know there are people who are working on this issue. Susan Taylor is working it all across the country. Michael Baisden, 100 Black Men, that was to be represented on this panel. There are people who are trying to do it, but we need to do more, and we have abdicated our responsibility in that regard. We need more churches, to believe in the faith, to manifest that in doing mentoring. Saturday schools is a good. I've always, for years and years and years, suggested that every church should be open after school and on Saturdays. So if it's not individual mentoring, it could be collective mentoring. Retired teachers coming to churches after school to help work with our students. And on Saturday, doing likewise. And in addition to getting the basics, also getting you're getting your black history. That black history is a fundamental ingredient to our liberation. You need to know who you are, from whence you've come, and what your obligation is to those on whose shoulders you stand. So I agree with you. Yeah. I apologize collectively for our generation, and I hope we'll do better.
Minister Muhammad, sorry, so you guys, the Nation of Islam, have been doing this for a long time.
Yes.
What's different?
We have a Saturday school. We have continuing education during the week. Mentoring can go one-on-one, but we can mentor. This can become a mentoring session and a group session. I'm willing to come to any school, large, small, medium size, small groups. We're known for doing this. And so we are present. We join Sister Susan Taylor and others who are in the effort, but we're here on the ground, and we're willing to come to anywhere. The teachers that are here today, the counselors that are here today, the Nation of Islam under Minister Farrakhan's leadership is willing. My leadership here in New York City are willing for Mosque No. 7 to continuously come and mentor young men and women into a more fruitful life that you can have for yourself. And let me just say this. I don't know what my elder, Dr. Daniels, disagreed with me on, because I agree with everything that he said for the record.
Well, let me explain, because Peter said the same thing. What I was trying to, and it's not a sharp disagreement.
No, I understand.
Peter just said, by the way, I don't like the hoodies. I don't like the sagging. I don't like that. That's my personal preference. But I don't like the idea of putting the onus on the victim. That's what I was saying.
Yes,
in other words, you should be able to wear your hoodie. You should be able to sag. If you want to sag, that don't mean that you're a criminal. You're not a criminal because you wear a hoodie and you sag.
And let's say this.
Come on.
Dr. Daniels is exactly right. I never spoke about hoodies. I said, morally, we have to stop giving the enemy a hula hoop to walk through. Let me give you a case in point. Many years ago, we were riding in a Lincoln Continental. Brother was getting married in the nation. We knew that if you look behind, when the police is behind you, they will pull you over. So we told one of the brothers, don't look behind. We'll get off 42nd Street. Everything will be fine. What does he do with his giggling self? Look behind. Popo pulled us over. He gave them the rationale, like you was explaining a moment ago, Peter Noel, about how they profile us. Pulled us over, pulled us out of the car, was going through the car. I said, we are followers of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. We don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't carry so much as a penknife. We don't use drugs, we don't carry drugs, we are not drug users. If you find anything in that car, the police put it there. People came around. What do you think the Popo did? They left their car alone.
That's right.
We were able to get in it and go about our business because they were about to set us up. So what I'm saying is we have a moral responsibility, which I know Dr. Daniels understands, that we need to do better by ourselves that our open enemy uses to come against us. Make no mistake about it. They said that it was better to control 1 million people's minds.
That's right.
It's easier today to kill 1 million people than to control them. We have a right to wear what we want to wear.
That's right.
Just because your pants are below your buttocks does not mean your brain has to be below your buttocks. But at the same time, if you pull it up, they'll believe that your brain is up a little bit higher.
And you have a right, let me just jump in here. I said I was going to jump in.
Yes,
you have a right to wear anything that you want. And you wear that until, you can wear a hoodie now, until you change the mindset of that white police officer. You have to change the mindset of the white man. And if you don't change that, then you wear that hoodie, you're going to be in trouble. That's what I want to say. You must change the mindset, and it's difficult to change that mindset. Sir.
Good morning, everyone.
I have a statement and I have a question.
All right, you go on. You got to make it really quick because we got some people we got to get out of here for the break.
The statement is they want you to believe that hoodies and other attire is the reason for the stop and frisk and the innocent killings of black young men. But I do recall Martin Luther King and Elijah Muhammad were in suits when they were assassinated.
What's the question? Good statement. What's the question?
That's the statement. The question is, how do we work with the mayor's office and the police station to stop killing our young black men because they think it's justified because we're all walking around with guns in our pockets?
Well, I think we've answered the questions at length. That last question at length. You guys agree with me, right? So let's move on to the last question. Move on to the last question, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeremiah, and I represent Humanities and the Arts High School. My question.
Humanities High School?
Yeah.
Sure. Good. Good school. Good school.
My question is: you guys mentioned Barack Obama earlier? My question is: do you think that Barack Obama represents the black community as much as he should?
We will begin where we left. We will leave off where we began, on Barack Obama, and I will throw the question out to the panel. Dr. Daniels, quickly.
My answer to that is yes. You say if he represents the finest in black humanity in the sense that here is a family that has risen up through adversity and difficulty on both sides, both in terms of his wife, his very beautiful and brilliant wife, Michelle, and his own story is the story of many, many, many African Americans, who have gone through various things and have gone on to Harvard, gone on to Columbia University, and spent time as a community organizer in the South Side of Chicago, and has risen to the point of being president of these United States of America. I think we all should be proud that we have someone who has that history and that background and that image as president of these United States of America. Now, the issue is, what do we expect of any president, whether that president is black or white? And what I'm saying is, as long as we have issues that are very important to us, then we expect any president to speak to those issues. As some of us said earlier, President Obama, because he is black, within the context of a society that is not a post-racial society, is in somewhat of a box, in a bind, because if he speaks out on race, he will be lambasted, and there are many whites who would then who even supported him last time who might not support him this time. So one of the things it seems to me that we have to do is we have to work hard to get this president, who is far better than anything we see on the other side, reelected. And then it's on us to say, Brother Obama, we love you, we appreciate all that you represent, but we also need you to be about creating some public policies that also help us get out of the mess that we're in these inner cities. And that's going to be on us. We're going to have to push him. We're going to have to organize. We're going to have to mobilize so strongly that he can say to all the world, I cannot ignore this. I can't ignore this as President of the United States because it's so strong. So that's my answer. I'm proud and was proud when I saw something that I never thought I would see in my lifetime, the election of a progressive president of these United States of the United States. And I choose those words advisedly because I would not have been as proud had it been somebody else, like the guy who sits on the Supreme Court. I would have been embarrassed had it been Clarence Thomas, for example, because Clarence Thomas does not represent for me the long struggle of black people in this country to do what. So he's on the restrictive side. He's on the side that's really trying to stop black people from moving forward, and poor people and working people and so forth. Obama is on the side of trying to make America a stronger, better country. He's just faced with some obstructionists who are in his way, who wanted to make him a one-term president, who wanted to see his health care become his Waterloo. So we got to understand all those things as we look at this election, see that he's reelected, then we got to step to him, as I said before, and say, Mr. President, we too are Americans, and we have needs, and we expect you to meet those needs.
Yes, sir.
Minister Muhammad, make it short quickly so we can get out of here.
Yes, sir. I'll be as quick as Dr. Daniels was.
Take your time, though.
No. Let me say to my brother that asked the question, that's a beautiful question.
It is.
And remember, students, the better the question you ask, the better the answer that can be given back to you. President Barack Obama, President Barack Hussein Obama, has been the best that we have produced politically from our ranks and from us as a people. He's a shining example. His wife, Michelle, and their daughters is a shining example of black intellectual aptitude and knowledge and inspiration. Who our brother was 4 years ago, our open enemies have been working to turn him and to make him a one-term president. However, we said earlier that he was not elected to be the black president. He was elected to be the president of the United States of America. We believe that he can do more and do better if he's reelected. But I will say what Minister Farrakhan said to him just recently at a major conference. He said, brother, they don't want you anyway, so you might as well just go out swinging and do what you need to do for black people and for progressives in this country, and don't wait for another term that's not promised to you.
All right.
And so we pray that he will take a bigger step in this last year before the hopes of a benevolent next year and next term, and do the things that he has in his heart that he said that he would do. We want to see our president live, and they are planning right now, we got to say it, his assassination. You need to get Minister Farrakhan's Savior's Day message from February 26, where he spoke 4.5 hours. Go to NOI.org or finalcall.com or go to ma7.org and get the information and understand what the president is facing. And I will say this, vote in your own self-interest. If you believe his reelection is our self-interest, then vote for it. Clearly, none of those others on the other side are our self-interest. Even when McCain was running, that wasn't our self-interest. Because just because you're a black man don't mean you have black interests in your mind. For many of us are black, but we allow white people to rent space in our thinking. We allow them to set up cooperatives and condos in our living room of our minds. So just because you're black don't mean you're for black. All right? When the Mau Mau's had to go to war, they had to go to war against their own people just to get to the white interloper who was killing us off worse than ourselves. And so we have to be mindful of that. So we pray the best for President Obama, but brothers and sisters, politics is not the panacea to our ills. Our root problem is a spiritual one that necessitates a spiritual solution. And my last point, from learning to leading, black man, you must realize that in order for you to lead, you have to follow, but you have to get behind a good leader who leads with love, who is courageous, who speaks truth to power, and is willing to give their life for you so you can learn to give your life for your people and never sell out for fame, for notoriety, never sell out for a microphone, never sell out for the cheap seat of the people. Fight for freedom, justice, and equality for all human beings, but you can't fight for everyone else unless you learn to fight for your beautiful black self. Thank you as we greet you.